disappointed in every one of you.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend you.
I'm disappointed in every one of you.
I kiss you on the mouth.
No, I'm not cool with that. I'm sorry.
One more time.
I'm disappointed in every one of you.
I mean, I'm dealing with degenerate animals.
I'm disappointed in every one of you. Disappointed in every one of you.
All right, come on.
Honestly, I can't do it no more.
I'm disappointed in every one of you.
Let me tell you why.
It's gonna be all right, Nicky. Go ahead, shoot.
We just killed a fucking man.
What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, because you got nothing. You don't got a thing. Yeah, because you got nothing. Got nothing.
I want to get out of this rat hole. I want to get online. I need
BDA boxing.
Whoa, welcome everybody to another BDA Boxing podcast, broadcasting to you live from the true north. It's your good friend Mr. BDA, and I sure am glad that everybody could be on board for this one, fellas. In this episode, we got a fantastic one for you. We don't have a lot of boxing coming up, but it gives us a chance to talk about the less known and talked about aspects of boxing, the more arcane subjects, as it were. We are delving back into the Silver Scrolls for this one, as is necessary when you're on the true path of the Crimson Cross. So shout out to everybody in the chat. Before we get down to we're going to be opening up the phone lines too, in case anybody wants to call in, give us their thoughts on anything boxing related. And before we get down to that, fellas, don't forget to hit the like. It really helps us out. Don't forget to subscribe if you yet to do so already. If you want to donate a couple of shekels our way, you're certainly welcome to do so with the Super Chat feature. It's always better if you join the membership program, though. That way you get more bang for your buck. But the most important thing, like I said, is continue to subscribe, like, and enjoy the show, all right? Keep commenting, fellas. Don't forget you can check us out on Spotify, iTunes, and Spreaker at your leisure, all right? Let's give a big old shout out to everybody in the chat. We got some anointed ones in the chat. We got Rafael Garza, Dark Haydo in the house. Shout out to those dudes. Ralph Unreal, Night Murph, Boxing Kangaroo. Shout out to him in the house. Quentin Lassiter, Trooper, Bray, Mr. Batman, Panchito El General, Boxing Chief, Zero Cool, Antonio Hernandez, KC Boxing, the Batman Boxing. Wait a minute, Team Batman Boxing. We got two Batmans. It can only really be one Batman from what I understand. Shout out to the Quags as well. Shout out to the Quags in the house. KG, Johnny Barrera, Never Sobers, Luis Torres. Many more people to come, I'm sure, fellas. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. Alrighty. Let me just invite a couple of people over here. Make things a little bit more interesting. But not more sexual, though. If that's what you get in mind, fellas, this ain't that type of show, right? Stay right there, Chief. It's going to take us to another room. I got to invite more people here, including Gonzalo, who keeps changing his avatar. I don't even know which Gonzalo it is now. I got four Gonzalos here in my contacts list. Who else? Yeah, so we're going to be just talking about... I want to start off by talking about the fight this Saturday, by the way. It's a fight that few people are talking about. Mainly because it's not the biggest fight in the world, but it's an intriguing matchup, that's for sure. Hold on a second. I'm talking about William Sepeda versus Maxi Hughes. That's going to be on the Zone. And I tell you, I don't know who wins that one. I mean, I'm picking Sepeda. But you just never know, do you? Hold on a second. I'm still trying to contact some people here. Where's King Bucho, by the way? Oh, okay, it's just Bucho. All right. So yeah, it's like I was saying, the zone. We got a good card. We got William Sepeda taking on Maxi Hughes. Now let me tell you what the problem here is gonna be for both fighters. They're both southpaws, so that's what we've got right there. But William Sepeda is a big lightweight. He's 5'9", and he's got a 69.5-inch reach. When he fought Alvarado, not Felix Alvarado, what was his name? It wasn't that, Rene Alvarado, about 2 years ago. Alvarado managed to keep him at the edge of his punches. And William Sepeda looked mortal in that fight. Since then, he scored a good win over Joseph Diaz, really laid a beating on poor Diaz. And he scored 2 stoppages afterwards against Jaime Arboleda and Mercito Gesta. But even though Maxi Hughes is a smaller guy in comparison, he's 34 years old, by the way. And he's listed, well, he's not listed here, but I think he's 5'7". And William Sepeda does look, like I said, 5'9", and he looks filled up too as a lightweight. The great thing that I like about Sepeda is his punch output. The guy can just throw punch after punch after punch. But let me tell you why I think this is going to be an interesting fight. They're both southpaws, so that left hand should be lined up a little bit more easier. Perhaps more jabs than these guys are accustomed to throwing is something we're going to be seeing. But William Sepeda has got a couple of problems. One is he tends to barge forward and pressure with his his right hand down, meaning his lead hand. And when you're a pressure fighter, you really want to be as compact as possible. I don't know why he insists on doing that. Maybe that's just bad technique, bad training, overconfidence, all of the above, perhaps. I don't know. Maxi Hughes, as he showed against Cambosos, he's a sharpshooter. And the thing about Maxi Hughes is he can crack you and then get out of the way. And I thought he beat Cambosos. I thought it was one of the worst decisions of the year. And he beat Cambosos about as well as Devin Haney did. And yet he fails to get the recognition because, well, the decision officially failed to go his way. But this dude is accurate, he's mobile, he's seasoned now at this point in his career. And I don't know if William Sepeda will convincingly defeat him. The other thing that Alvarado did, I think I mentioned it earlier, was that he kept Sepeda at the end of his shots because he was firing throwaway shots. And that sort of kept Sepeda busy. It kept him planted in his feet because, like I said, he tends to drop his lead hand. And then when guys shoot shots at him, he tends to try to move the upper body, but he's not getting any closer. He just stands there trying to avoid the shots. And meanwhile, the other guy can just fire those throwaway shots and then get out of the way. So, I mean, if Sepeda wants to beat Hughes, he has to parry and keep coming forward, block and keep coming forward. He can't just stand there and getting hypnotized by those throwaway shots. So it's going to be an interesting fight. I'm looking forward to it. And I think perhaps Cepeda's going to learn or have learned from the Alvarado fight. And I think he's just going to barge through those single shots from Maxi Hughes. Because that's really the problem with Maxi Hughes. He was able to get away with this approach against Cambosos, who's not a good pressure guy, and he's mostly a rhythm fighter. You can read his rhythm pretty easily if you're a top-notch fighter. He'll come in with a quick 1-2 or 2-3. Maybe he'll fire 3 shots. Meanwhile, Sepeda, although not as quick as Cambosos, will barge forward and he can string together 7-8 punch combinations. So that's what he's going to do here. But do not be surprised if early on Hughes is teeing off on Sepeda. This is a fight that's going to let us know whether Cepeda's got a good defense, whether he can work on that, whether he can improve on his holes. He's 27 years old, so one would hope that he's already as close to a complete fighter as he can be, but we shall see. That's taking place this Saturday via the Zone. And you also got Floyd Schofield on the undercard. So you're going to see one of the young boxing talents in boxing on that undercard. All right, so the title of this video is Anything Goes. Again, there's not much going on in boxing. Chief, I don't think, just to recap what occurred this past Friday between Joshua and Ngannou, it seems like the tables have reorganized themselves here. Boxing once again being given a little bit of credit for how difficult it is to break through at the highest level. This is something that was unseen or unthought of back in the 90s and 2000s. What do you make of this, and is this the end of this crossover fights?
Well, when a fighter of the other side, meaning like a mixed martial arts or a different style and specialty, can create enough attention, people will believe in him, just like they did with Conor McGregor, and like some people did with Francis, and they'll buy into it because they think their guy can do anything. But I think this has put a staple in the fact that one's apples, one's oranges. Even though they're both fruit, they don't taste the same. I mean, I think that's an exclamation point now. McGregor's come over, Francis come over. Neither one of them won. James Toney went over. He didn't win. Ray Mercer did win, but it was two faded fighters well past their prime on a lower level of mixed martial arts. It wasn't like UFC championship. And so we're starting to realize that the ones that are very proficient at what they do are good at what they do, but it's also they're limited to what styles they have. So I don't think anyone's going to be paying huge money for this again for a little bit, because this one really exposed. I think that Tyson Fury showed up against Francis. How do you say his last name again?
Ngannou.
That's why I kept calling him Francis. I didn't want to mispronounce his name. So Ngannou. Mayweather claims that he didn't train for his fight against these mixed martial arts guys, and he just shows up, drops a robe and gets to work. So for some reason, I think Tyson Fury believed him, said, hey, I can do the same thing, and didn't prepare, and had a fight that many people thought he arguably, well, I say arguably because officially he won, but many people thought he lost. Joshua went and said, you know what, I'm going to prove a point, and got in shape and got focused and beat a novice in all actual terms. I mean, not saying this man wasn't tough, not saying he wasn't good at his craft in UFC, but he's 38 years old and he's 0-1 as a professional boxer. That's the reality of what happened. And then a gold medalist and 3-belt champion, a 2-time 3-belt champion, was in the ring with him and exposed him for what he is as a boxer, not as a fighter as a whole. So yeah, I think this is going to put a damper in trying to market these things as a huge sellers, because who's the next one that's going to have a shot, and what's their skill set? If they don't have the kind of skill set that's going to throw somebody like that off, then they're more than likely going to lose.
Yeah, but we still have a bit of ways to go here before the end of this type of exhibitions. I mean, we got Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, and I know that's not a crossover per se, but it is a bit of a freak fight. Moreover, there's always the possibility that Jake Paul takes on a guy like Masvidal. Once the UFC chews Masvidal up, that's a fight. That's a guy that has got some striking ability. He could potentially try to get himself a boxing crossover match. And there was another dude. Who was I thinking about? That could, that Strickland is another guy who's got hands, as they like to say. He could potentially transition over to boxing for one of these freak fights. So, unfortunately, I don't think this is the end, but it does add a different dynamic now that Joshua proved what a real world-class guy can do. But you know what I also started to dislike is how some people started asking the question. I saw this on Twitter. Somebody goes, how does AJ versus Usyk 3 go? And I'm thinking just about the same, if you ask me.
Yeah. I was at a friend's house, and he says, this is what a focused Anthony Joshua can do.
Oh, come on.
Look, but Joshua was in really good shape, and he was focused, and he was motivated. And hats off to him. He came in to prove the fact that he's a level above this other guy. Congratulations. Good job. That doesn't put you a level above Usyk or Tyson Fury. Now, we don't have yet to find out about Tyson Fury. They haven't fought. But, and especially with Tyson Fury, his performance against Nadagu, there's parallels that can be drawn. Both British heavyweights, one annihilated the guy, one possibly got a gift decision. Understand. But at the end of the day, Joshua, again, took on a novice. A man that I don't even know what this man's proficiency was in UFC because I don't follow it. So I don't know if he's more of a grappler, if he's a nice mix between the two. I don't know if he's better with kicks. I know nothing about him except for the fact that he knocked Tyson Fury down and gave him a good run and got knocked out in 2 rounds by Joshua. That's all I know about him. I don't know anything else because I don't follow that sport.
I think I'd only seen one of his fights, and apparently I was on Frank Bay's podcast, and I was asking him and Sobers, who are more MMA connoisseurs, about whether Ngannou, because I told him, I'm reading on Twitter that a lot of people are shocked that Ngannou got stopped, and they said that, because in MMA his chin was considered titanium-like. He'd never been hurt, I don't think, that in that type of way. So it was a bit of a shock for the MMA adherents to see one of their top fighters laid out that way. Especially because, again, Chief, you got to remember, a lot of these guys, they thought that the bigger gloves in boxing actually means that you don't hit as hard as they would do. Yeah.
So I'm not a scientist that can sit there and measure pounds per square inch with bigger gloves versus smaller gloves or anything like that. What I do know is that Joshua is 6'6", 230 plus, 40, 50, 60 plus pounds. I don't know where he really weighs in at, but I know he's well over 230. And he's proficient at punching technique. So he knows how to follow through. The punch that he knocked him down with for the first time in the second round, he put his shoulder back like he was throwing an overhand, and Dongo put his arm out to try and block it, but then he pulled it in and turned it straight. Most MMA fighters aren't going to know how to do that because they're not clear strikers. Not all of them are. And even the clear strikers, they still, like Chuck Liddell was a great striker, but he kept his hands up with his elbows parallel to the ground because it fit the style of MMA. It didn't fit the style of boxing. Mm-hmm. And those little 4-ounce gloves that they have, they're just enough to keep your knuckles from being breaking. Just doesn't. It can possibly. It seems more like bruising power because I don't watch it enough. I'm not going to sit here and stake my reputation on my opinion on mixed martial arts, but I've seen more shots where a guy gets hit and they go down and then they get pummeled after. There are one-punch knockouts. Don't get me wrong. I don't know them all. I can't name any. There are a few of them out there where a guy gets clocked with a punch into or a kick and they're out. Like the referee immediately jumps in, doesn't even let the other guy jump on top of him because they're out. But more often than not, what I usually see is the guy goes down and then they go to pummel and finish him off. Right. I've seen more one-punch knockouts of someone being hit and cocked cold in boxing than I have of highlights, and given all I really watch is highlights in mixed martial arts. So take my opinion for what it's worth on someone that doesn't follow the other side as closely. But those, like I said, it seems more like they bust up faces and they break bones than it does concussively knocking people out. And I can't say that the larger gloves make that happen. Again, that's a science thing. I'm not a science guy. But it leads me to believe that the concussive power that comes along with your fist being protected more, you're able to put more into your shot and with less fear of breaking your hand. People still hurt their hands, don't get me wrong, but compared to a 4-ounce glove. And it's like Pete said, your body's only going to let you put yourself into pain for so long before it's going to start to pull back, and you're not going to let yourself punch with the same force because you can only break your hand so many times before your mind's going to go like, all right, we're going to pull back a split second just before the punch because we know that if we follow all the way through, it might break. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
yeah, I started watching MMA back in the 90s, mid-90s. I would rent the videotapes. I think I've said this before, and I was really into it back then. Then by the early to mid-2010s, I really started. During the 2000s, I was in and out with the MMA, but it's really at the midpoint of the 2010s that I really stopped watching. And one of the reasons why I've stopped watching is because, like that, exactly what you mentioned. It's a lot of these fights. There's very little that tends to happen. There's a lot of looking at each other. And then all of a sudden, one strike, The guy flops to the ground. The opponent jumps on top of him, a couple of hammer fists, and that's it. I've seen so many of those, especially these high-level championship fights end that way. And it's, everyone loves a knockout, but when there's too many knockouts, that's, to me, it's almost like too much sugar. It loses its value. It loses its specialty. Or specialness, rather.
True, but on the flip side, the Floyd Mayweather boxing was GSP, because he learned how to master his style to where he may not submit. I'm not saying he didn't submit anybody, he didn't knock anybody out, but what he perfected was, I'm going to stay on top in the aggressive position for 3 5-minute rounds, or 5 5-minute, however many they go. I know that they have different time sets, but he would keep the power position and not let the other guy flip him over, in which case you're usually buying a decision. Well, that's what you get when you buy Floyd Mayweather fight. He'd talk up a game and fight a Hispanic fighter on Hispanic holidays, but he purposely picked guys that he could see the punches coming so he could tie him up and go the distance unless a knockout opportunity came, which he rarely put himself at risk to do.
Right.
And that turned a lot of people off too. Some people that really love the essence of that sport, just like we love the essence of boxing, stay loyal to it. That's great. But casuals, and I was a casual for MMA, just didn't stay with it. And then was it Silva, the Brazilian guy? I don't think he turned anybody off. He was definitely a powerhouse. But like you said, his fights are one kick over, punch, and the guy goes down. And he was, you're not getting a good challenging fight of two equally mano-a-mano guys, and some people lose interest in that. When you're fighting, getting a predicted outcome, like Floyd Mayweather's going to go the distance, GSP is going to go the distance, or you're only going to get about 30 seconds from I think his name was Anderson Silva. You're get what's piquing your interest anymore, because it's not the challenge of the fight.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. It's. I mean, with Anderson Silva, it was a specialty factor, like the Roy Jones factor, that he was doing things that nobody else was doing. But I also remember I went with a couple of friends once. They took me to see one of his fights. I forget, it was one Korean guy. I think it was Korean Zombie. That was the guy's nickname. And then there was another dude, Brazilian guy. And they were boring fights. And, for every Vitor Belfort performance that he put forward, or Dan Henderson fight, there were others where it was just boring and the other guys couldn't do anything with him. So, but listen, it's not that dissimilar to boxing, where some of the top guys make it look easy and therefore uneventful, but it is what it is. Now, before we get to the heavyweight talk here, because we're going to be talking about some, comparing a little bit the boxers of today with the boxers of the past, because so many people nowadays say, boxing today isn't what it used to be, the skill level and all that. And I'm curious to put that to the test. But I want to talk about Juan Francisco Estrada, El Gallito, who's campaigning at Super Flyweight. Apparently, they're planning on pitting him against Bam Rodriguez. And it's interesting, Chief, because in Bam Rodriguez, we got a guy who's, I think he's 24 now, already has a win over Cisraket Sorongvisai, Carlos Cuadras, and a contemporary undefeated young fighter in the last guy he beat. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name, but the guy that looked like a Celt. And, it's interesting because it seems like he's a future all-time great. I wouldn't say he's an all-time great now, but I'm saying future. Like if he continues on the path that he was, right? But Sonny Edwards, I'm talking about. Yeah, Sonny Edwards, whom he really just demolished. But let's not forget what was happening before the Sonny Edwards fight. He actually went 24 rounds and failed to look as impressive as he had in the beginning of 2023. So now he fights Sonny Edwards, who's a very good fighter, mobile fighter, but who can't crack an egg. And all of a sudden, now people are picking him over Gallito Estrada. My thing about this, Chief, is, Bam Rodriguez is one of the gems of today's boxing, but the Estrada fight, I'm a little ambivalent. Estrada hasn't fought in over a year. It seems like he wants to just cash out. So I don't know how excited I can get over that fight. But I'll say this, man, when it comes to Estrada, and I know I was being a little bit overly generous with him during 2016 when Canelo wasn't doing what I wanted him to do. And I kept telling people, listen, forget Canelo. Estrada is the real Mexican, the best Mexican fighter out there. And then, of course, since then, Canelo overtook him. But Estrada, if you think about it, whether he wins or loses against Bam Rodriguez, he's got 2 wins over Chocolatito. And we're not going to nitpick and say that it's only one because the rematch was a robbery. Let's stick to the facts. It was, at least on paper, it's 2 wins over Chocolatito, 2 wins over Estrada, a win over Cisraket Sorongvisai. That's 5 solid wins. And then there's some adjacent wins like Tysoncito Marquez, Giovanni Segura, who used to be a heck of a fighter back in the day. Who else?
Brian Viloria.
Brian Viloria, thank you. Yeah, Brian Viloria. So I think, wouldn't you agree that's a Hall of Fame resume right there by today's standards?
No doubt. I do wish that when everybody was there and like a little more gas left in the tank, they would have done some round robins with Rungvisai and Chocolatito and company. With Quadras being like, I guess, the odd man out because he was not quite as good as the rest of them. But he was still tough enough to make good fights. I wish they would have done like almost like a mini 4 Kings of that weight class, but it didn't come to fruition. What I will say is the fact that, well, I mean, you could have also thrown Danny Nietes in there and Ioka. So, I mean, when you brought in that, I honestly think that is the one. I've never seen a weight class with that many potential Hall of Famers with solid resumes at one time, at almost all the same age, at the same stage of their careers, that you can look at each one of them and just go, yeah, there's no reason why that guy can't get the Hall of Fame. And him too. And him too. And like, there's at least 3 or 4 of them there. You got Chocolatito, Estrada, Ioka, and Nietes. And then you still have Rungvisai and Quadras on top of that. That's 6 guys that the last 2 obviously don't fit that realm of the Hall of Fame, but they gave the other Hall of Famers tough fights. So back to Estrada. Yeah, I'd say you can't help but say that he deserves the Hall of Fame based off the fact it's 2 or 3 division champion, and definitely the wins over Chocolatito. All right, controversial or not, Chocolatito didn't dominate him the way he dominated everybody else. So obviously that makes Estrada special, because most other people that Chocolatito fought, even at 115, past his prime, he was still the decisive winner on the fights that he won. And he wasn't overly decisive against Estrada because some people thought Estrada won. Most fans didn't, but there were writers and other people that thought that he did. And then he supposedly convincingly beat him in the 3rd fight. The fights were obviously close enough to where the decision to win Estrada's way. Even if I think that they should have been, I don't believe Andre Ward was anywhere close to beating Kovalev. However, somebody thought that 2 or 3 people thought that he did. Same with Estrada and Chocolatito. Obviously, that he made it tough enough for Chocolatito not to dominate him the way he did everybody else. Only a special fighter can do that because Chocolatito dominates everybody else.
Yeah.
So, I would.
Donnie Nietes
solid
is
Hall of
really
Famer.
Donnie Nietes is a guy that I do wonder what could have been. I mean, he did beat Ioka, although some people dispute that win, but whatever. We're just talking. We're pretend we're 15 years away from this guy's retirement, and we're looking at things just on paper. He did beat Ioka. He beat Chihuas Rodriguez, who was a good young fighter coming up. So he had, and then on top of that, look, whether there's not that many recognizable names, perhaps on his resume or dossier, because I know you don't like the word resume, but there's also something to be said about longevity. The fact that he remained undefeated for a good long while. I think that should, but
undefeated. You got undefeated. You've got 4 divisions, and I know those divisions are stacked close together. You have very rarely do you have fighters that are dominant down there. And so when you got Ricardo Lopez, even Michael Carbajal, God bless him, he wasn't overly, he kept coming around, but he wasn't dominant because he would lose and then get a title back and he'd be on strife for a while. So having people that like are extremely like tearing through everybody and not losing to anyone, you got your Chocolatito, you got Ricardo Lopez, even Chiquita Gonzalez had his ups and downs, so did Michael Carbajal, and those are 2 first ballot Hall of Famers down in that those weight classes between 105 to 115. Mm-hmm. So when you have guys that win that many titles and are that successful against that many opponents, you can say, how good was their competition? Well, what are you measuring it against? The fact that they didn't beat an alphabet soup champion, or the fact that they won titles in that many weight classes? Because not everybody down there is doing that. If it's that easy, even though the titles are watered down because we have so many in so many divisions, I do respect that point of view. But if it's that easy, why don't we have like 10 or 20 4-division champions from 105 to 115? We don't, because those guys are special. That's why.
I mean, those guys in the lower weight divisions, it's a cliche, but it's true. A cliche can be true. Hence why they're a cliche, because it's oversaid. And yeah, the little guys, they don't get the praise that they deserve. But let's go to something that gets perhaps too much praise. That's the heavyweight division. And no, we're not going to talk too much about Fury Usyk right now. That's still about 2 months away. Mike Tyson. We were talking on the Discord last night about Mike Tyson. Now, I'm just curious, where do you rank Mike Tyson? Not numerically, but as a fighter, are you one of those guys that thinks very few heavyweights out there could have beaten a prime Mike Tyson?
I similar point of view. The way I look at it is that only the special fighters would have beaten him. So, Cleveland Williams was a top fighter during Muhammad Ali and Sonny Liston's time. Cleveland Williams doesn't beat him. Floyd Patterson doesn't beat him. I don't know about Rocky Marciano and Joe Louis, size factors and style factors and things like that. But when you're ranking on who would beat Mike Tyson, you're not saying, Chisora would have beaten Mike Tyson, or who was a contender and never won. Razor Ruddock clearly didn't beat him. Who was another contender in the 80s that never won a belt that you'd say, oh, well, he would have beaten Tyson? Nobody like that gets mentioned. Okay, you're saying, well, Sonny Liston would have beat him. George Foreman would have beaten. Joe Frazier. Okay, you're talking Hall of Famers. No one's saying that Tim Witherspoon would have beaten Mike Tyson. Nobody says that. Frank Bruno didn't beat him. Tony Tubbs didn't beat him. Tony Tucker didn't beat him. These are all people that have the name champion next to them. Watered down or not, these men have the title champion next to them. So when you're thinking of where Mike Tyson fits and how great he is, one, none of the aforementioned fighters could have been champion who were right at 20, almost 21. Maybe Muhammad Ali, Floyd Patterson did win it, I think 21. Tyson won at 20. He was close to being 21, but he was close. I think he's closer to 21 than he was 19. But 19 through 20, all the way up into that, legal age 21. All right, who else does that? Especially at heavyweight. Name me a single person you would turn pro at 17 to 18 years old, would clean out grown men, and then win the title against, you can say Burbert may have been overrated. He went 15 rounds with Holmes. And Tyson took him out in 2 rounds. Yeah, different life. I'm sure he had some other. Didn't he go 15 rounds with Holmes? I'm pretty sure he did.
Who did you say went 15? Who?
Burbick.
Yeah, I believe he did. I'm gonna double check.
He went 15 rounds with Larry Holmes, but Tyson takes him out in 2 rounds. Given it's later in his career, he's a little bit older, but Burbick was not small. He was usually pretty durable against some people when he wanted to be, and Tyson takes him out in 2 rounds at 20 years old. Okay, well, Holyfield couldn't have done that at 20 because at 20 he wasn't a heavyweight. He wasn't even a pro, I don't think. I think he turned pro like 22. Lennox Lewis wasn't, winning titles in his 3rd pro fight because he turned pro later. So he wasn't knocking out guys like knocking on the door in his first or his 2nd year as a pro. Tyson turned pro 1 year, won the title at the end of the next at 20 years old. So there's something special about that nobody else has done. And again, when you're talking about Tyson, you're saying, maybe Lennox Lewis could have beaten him. Maybe Riddick Bowe, who I think is slightly overrated based off of his accomplishments, not off his skill. Not off his skill, but accomplishments.
Right.
But when it comes time, no one's saying Michael Moore or Ray Mercer or Tommy Morrison, these 1-belt champions that only held 1 belt for a little bit of time. No one is picking them to beat Mike Tyson. So he's got to have a level of greatness because only big names that are surefire Hall of Famers that you want to put in almost any other era are the ones you're picking to beat Mike Tyson.
So let me just so let's get into the fact that Buster Douglas beat him. Now, of course, by that time Tyson already leading a desultory lifestyle, which is incompatible with greatness as a boxer. And even then, he still gave Buster Douglas a tough fight. Dropped him. He dropped him and he took a lot of punch. That's the other thing. Buster Douglas was not a small guy. He was not a knockout puncher, but his knockout percentage wasn't extremely low. And he was
6'3", 6'4", 220, 230 pounds with an 81-inch reach. And he knew how to turn his shots he knew how to turn his weights into his shots. So Tyson was walking through a lot of those punches because his head movement wasn't quite what it used to be. Not every heavyweight could have taken that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, the greats probably could have. Holmes, Foreman, all those guys probably could. And Buster Douglas was not a bum. He was an underachiever. A bum is someone that has no skill or talent and can never win a title. An underachiever is someone that could have been very good and possibly even borderline great, but didn't live up to their potential. And that's exactly what Buster Douglas was.
Now, let's not forget, too, that Douglas's mother, was it his mother, right, who'd passed away?
Yeah. That motivated him.
Right, that can be a power boost. I mean, it's easy to say in hindsight, Tyson wasn't. Because nowadays, we're in the days now where if you point out the outside the ring circumstances that might have led to a guy being less than stellar shape, are excuses. Nowadays boxing fans want to make it about you, the guy giving their opinion, as opposed to, well, let's dissect the opinion. And so, yeah, look, if Tyson was in less than great shape, and then on the top of that, Buster Douglas gets himself in optimum shape and powers up because of the passing away of his mother, those are all external factors that if I would have known about those going into a fight and I'm betting or picking a favorite, you bet your keister I'm considering those things for picking a win. So I don't understand when people go, oh, that's excuses. You can call it what you want. They factor in a result. So yeah, that Tyson, but then again, Chief, I still remember when Tyson retired in 2005. By that time, a lot of boxing writers, he was persona non grata with a lot of boxing writers. And when he lost, immediately they started talking about his legacy. Well, how good was he really? And they talked about how he was a comet, or excuse me, a meteorite, a meteor. He burned bright, but for a short period of time. And then came the question, did he ever overcome adversity? Because that's what boxing fans and pundits always want to analyze for to judge an all-time great. Did he overcome adversity in a fight where he was like Rocky Marciano, for example? What was it against Jersey Joe Walcott, where his nose is split open, he gets dropped. It looks like they're about to stop.
I think that was Ezra Charles. Ezra Charles, I think his nose was split. Jersey Joe Walcott dropped him.
Okay, so there you go.
And so did Archie Moore. Archie Moore dropped him too. So he overcame adversity like that.
Those old smaller guys gave him hell, but he overcame it. You can say it's because of the size advantage, youth advantage, whatever. He overcame it. Tyson never did. What are your thoughts on that?
So, one, those are fair statements. I mean, but at the same time, some of the adversity he was overcome that he did overcome wasn't as drastic. I mean, Tony Tucker hit him with one heck of an uppercut that shook him, but instead of letting him fighting back on his heels and back off, he went in and attacked and put Tucker back on his heels. He got staggered by Frank Bruno, and instead of fighting on his back heel or being defensive and just looking to counterpunch, he went after Frank Bruno. And people don't look at that. They don't analyze that other side to that. So his adversity wasn't that he was knocked down and behind the scorecards, but these guys came to fight and they got him. They reached him and they made him stagger. Burbick actually even, when you have a really good eye to watch, he hit Tyson with a body shot that kind of made him bend over and back up a step. So that body shot stunned him a little bit. Didn't really hopefully hurt him. He didn't, come close to knocking him down, but it was a very, very slight thing that you can pick up on the fact that one made him think. It may not have knocked the wind out of him, but it did give him a slight stun. What did he do instead of immediately becoming defensive and moving around the ring to clear his head? He went at him. And then he shipped him out. Now, he didn't knock out Tucker, but he convincingly beat Tucker. The Frank Bruno knockout. Look, Frank Bruno been beaten by a lot of guys. I know this, but Tyson's version of knocking him out, you thought his head was like a buoy in a hurricane. It was just bobbing all over the place. The way he knocked Bruno out was so brutally vicious. You've got to consider that as part of who he was. Ali was good and he had some highlight reel moments, but not all those highlight reel moments were how those fights really ended. When you see those people bobbing around and stuff like that in Tyson's knockout reels, that was the end of the fight. It wasn't like he knocked him down and then the ref stopped it. That was the end of the fight. Ali's clear moment when he did that to Cleveland Williams, he jumped in with a double left hook and right hand. Williams got up from that, and then the fight went on, and it got stopped a little bit later. That was a highlight reel knockdown, but that wasn't the knockout of the fight. When Tyson's doing that and the person's head's flying up and they tumble like a ton of bricks, that is the end of the fight. That's not a highlight of, well, the fight went on and then he stopped. No, that's the end. That was done. It was over. And that dominance that he had, those gifts, those intangibles that he was born with that power and hand speed and the ferocity. The only times he wasn't overly ferocious were one when he lost the hunger, and you can say that's an excuse all you want to, but if your mind ain't right, you can't win. So it's funny how it's an excuse for Mike Tyson, but no one cares about when James Toney did that 5 or 6 times. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, man.
James Toney is a first ballot Hall of Famer. We all know he's great. But how many times did he eat too many Whoppers at Burger King and not show up against Montel Griffith or Drake the Adzi of someone who's never going to be the closest he'll be able to be at the Hall of Fame is in the audience watching someone else get inducted.
Yeah, you're right, man.
And with all due respect to him, he had some moments and he has a win over James Toney, who's a Hall of Famer. So congratulations, Drake. You deserve that. But when we're talking greatness, he's never going to be mentioned in the all-time greats. He's just going to have a blip on James Toney's record. And again, I'm not saying that to be cruel to him. I'm putting in perspective that you're going to give James Toney a pass that he dropped the ball more than one time with all that natural talent, but Tyson was overrated. You can't have it both ways.
No, you're right. You're right. By the way, just refresh my memory real quick. Who was the guy that got robbed against Toney in the early to mid 90s?
Dave Tiberi.
Dave Tiberi. Okay, thank you. So you're right. Inconsistency. And you know what's interesting about inconsistency? Some people they actually use that as a marker of how good the guy was. That, he was unprepared, and he still gave those people hell. And in their mind, they formulate that as if he would have gotten himself in shape, he would have beaten those guys. So that's how great he is. But look, I don't give guys points for what could have been. I mean, we went through that whole thing with Zab Judah. How many times did we hear Zab Judah before a fight? If he only gets in shape, he'd be unstoppable. Guess what? He was in shape for the Miguel Cotto fight, and Miguel Cotto ran through him. So this whole what ifs, I don't want to hear him.
Well, the other side of that is people think that, first of all, Zab, you could tell he was a physical specimen. So he was in shape for those fights. But when you start to talk about Zab, you need to throw in Raul Marquez and Ricky Sanchez, fighters of that caliber, Ed Hobson. They were great amateurs that were really good. You could even throw Diego Corrales in there. They were good for a certain point of a fight. But after it got to a certain point when greatness takes over because you're a level above everything else, they got ordinary. Zab got ordinary after a couple rounds, especially after he got knocked out by Zoo. But even before that, if you remember the Mickey Ward fight, he got hit with a body shot and it got his attention, and he kind of went back-footed and he was slick and he did what he had to do to win. I take nothing away from him for that. What I'm saying is that this blistering speed and getting angles and trying to take chances of knocking him out by busting his face up, that went out the window. So between safety first and survival, which I fault no man for doing in the ring, especially as a man that's never been punched for a living, I'm not going to condemn them. But my point is, the great fighters don't lose focus. That when their mind works. Great example: Felix Trinidad against my friend Fernando Vargas. I said that on purpose.
Yeah, I got you.
When in the 12th round, after he landed that first left hook and Vargas goes down, he goes to the corner, he jumps up in there, and the fight goes on. When he goes out, I always called it the shake and bake. He goes over and he drops his right hand on purpose because he knew when Vargas went to throw the hook, Vargas would drop his own right hand. And when Trinidad dropped his, baiting Vargas to throw his own hook, he knew this. And this is the 12th round of a grueling fight. Trinidad still had the whereabouts to know that if I drop my right hand and bait the hook, I can time him and I can knock him down again. Okay, Zab didn't have that after a couple rounds. Neither did Raul Marquez. Neither did some of these other fighters that were only good early. Diego Corrales also. Trinidad did. That's why he's great. In the 12th round, he knew how to still set up traps. Ray Leonard did. That's how he beat Wilfred Benitez. Benitez was a great fighter on his own and is a Hall of Famer. So the fact that Ray Leonard can figure out how to do that against a future Hall of Famer and a two-time world champion in his first world title fight in the 14th or 15th round, right? There's your difference. These people that are great are special. But anyone that can win a title compared to me is obviously special. Okay? They have an ability I'll never have, right? Mm-hmm. But to maintain it and to be able to have that kind of greatness throughout a 12 to 15 round fight, throughout that fight to try and say that they're overrated when someone like Zab Judah, who's a very gifted athlete, can't do that. When Raul Marquez, who's a very strong conditioned fighter, can't do that. These guys are a level above. They're a level above good. They're a level above great. That's why they're all-time greats. That's why they're first ballot Hall of Famers, including Mike Tyson.
Well, it's interesting then, back to the Tyson issue then, is that there's been some revisionism, and I can pinpoint when that revisionism started, because again, when he retired in 2005, it almost seemed, first of all, the way these writers wrote about him, it almost seemed like an obituary. Because like I said in another show, most people thought that, okay, once he retires, they gave him maybe 3 to 5 years before he died, either of an overdose or in a police shootout or something. That's how bad he was doing back then, and that's how badly his social standing was in the media. And when they wrote about him, they wrote about how he was an underachiever. Then comes that one-man show, the appearances in The Hangover, the appearances in cartoons, and all of a sudden he becomes some sort of like a sympathetic figure, and now he goes from being overrated to underrated. He goes from being underrated to sort of being a legend that nobody could have stopped him. So I'm just pointing out. I'm not saying that I agree or disagree with either of those scenarios, but I'm just saying how interesting it is how things change within 15, 20 years. But now back to the Tyson issue.
Okay.
The fact that we also have to, like you mentioned, the context. He was barely an adult, and he was already unifying the heavyweight division. So you got to give him props for that. Like you said, the ferocity
against seasoned champion, against seasoned world-class fighters. And when I say world-class fighters, I don't necessarily mean all-time greats, but Bone Crusher Smith had a handful of title fights under his belt. So did Trevor Berbick. So these guys had been in world title fights. They had world championship and more world championship experience than he did, and people overlooked that.
And you know what? That's the other thing. So there's a context of how young he was, the ferocity. I think I mentioned to you yesterday in the Discord that a lot of the guys clinched against him, and I still don't understand why these fucking stupid referees let that go. And then on top of that, when people say, "Oh, well, he burned bright, but too short a time," I'm thinking, well, who cares, man? How it's like with Lomachenko. I've heard some of the dumb criticism I hear against Lomachenko, for example, is, well, he only had 18 fights or something. I'm thinking, well, I don't care if he's got 6 or 7 fights. If all those 6 or 7 fights are quality wins, that's what we're judging him on. Because again, how many guys had 40 fights, but only 15 of those count? So in other words, I don't care how many fights he had total. I'm talking about the quality of opposition. So Tyson, he beat all the title holders. He ended up beating Michael Spinks. And again, that was
and Larry Holmes.
And Larry Holmes, yeah.
And
before
people go off on the Larry Holmes thing of Holmes being old, remember how successful, even though he didn't win the title again, how successful his career was in his comeback, and how tough that fight was for Evander Holyfield. And Tyson knocked him out in 4 rounds. Long layoff. There's many things, and I've said some of these things in defense of Holmes also. So I'm not trying to be a hypocrite, but I'm putting things into two sides of the story. Yes, Holmes was off for a long time. He had a lot of ring rust. He was old. He gets knocked out by Tyson. He gets a few tune-up fights. And then he beats Ray Mercer and gives Holyfield the toughest fight of his first title reign. So, and then almost beats Oliver McCall at almost the age of 50. So how does that hurt or help or elevate or make the decline of Tyson's record based off the fact that nobody else after Tyson did that to Holmes?
Right. So I give him, if we're talking about did he do the best he could, I mean, he accomplished what he wanted to. He became the de facto heavyweight champion. He was undisputed. There was no dispute who was the best heavyweight at the time. And I don't care if it lasted 6 months, 2 years, 1 year. He did what he accomplished. But then that's a different thing than saying, well, who else could beat him? And that's what we were talking about, the Lennox Lewis thing. Lennox Lewis,
right,
at 6 feet 5 inches tall, kind of like Tucker and Bone Crusher Smith. But I dare say Lennox Lewis was better than those guys. And again, I'll be fair. If it doesn't involve clinching, I think it's a much harder, much more difficult fight for Lewis. But again, it's a guy that can match Tyson's strength, boxing skills. He's got length to him. I don't know if Tyson beats that guy. If they fight 5 times, yeah, I'll give him 1, 2. But I think Lewis was a bad styles matchup for him.
It's not when you brought up the clinching last night in the Discord, that was something, and I've brought that up as a weakness of Tyson's also. If you kept your gloves in like Ike Corte would, right? And I know he's a welterweight, but try and picture what I'm saying. And Tyson's coming at you and trying to block the shots that way, he'd tee off on you until you physically couldn't do anything anymore. The pain would be so much you would have to collapse. But if you put one glove on him, he'd dance with you like your prom date until the referee would break him. That's just something he couldn't. He had a mental block when it came to a clinch. He wasn't very good at fighting out of one. And so if Lennox Lewis grabs a lot, then yeah, you've got a point. He's big, he's tall, he's strong, he leans on Tyson, he can wear the legs down. There's things that go in his favor. But I'm trying to think of how many fights Lennox Lewis wasn't stunned. I don't remember before he won the title, but he was stunned against Tony Tucker twice or 2 or 3 times. Stunned against Bruno. He was stunned against Phil Jackson, who was a cruiserweight. He was knocked out by Oliver McCall. If I remember, he got buzzed in the first round against Lionel Butler. Overcame it quickly and fought him off of him. But Lionel Butler was I won't even say he was an underachiever. He was a butterball that had a punch. Point being, we're going to keep going. So after, I believe Akinwande hit him with a shot that some people thought might have been a slip or a knockdown, but it turned his head. Akinwande. Okay, then you got the also underachiever and Shannon Briggs staggered him all over the ring, but wasn't a good finisher. So we have this track record of guys that were nowhere near Mike Tyson's caliber that if they could Ray Mercer arguably beat him. So when you get this caliber of fighters that are pretty good punchers, but they're not devastating finishers like Tyson, there's and as much of your point of it's a bad style matchup for Tyson, it's also a bad matchup style for Lewis prime v prime, because if Tyson reaches that chin, and he could reach Terrell Biggs' chin, who's nowhere near as good a fighter as Lennox Lewis, don't get me wrong, but you're talking about reaching height and distances of a tall, lanky fighter who's about the same height and had about the same reach. Well, Tyson was able to close the distance on that and was able to get inside. And then when he did, when Biggs tried to clinch, and he's no Lennox Lewis, again, even though he beat Lennox Lewis in the amateurs, Tyson hit the body. For that particular fight, he was not going to let someone clinch him. He wanted that fight. So if he's hungry enough against Lewis, which he may not have been, but if he was, and he comes in and we're talking hungry prime versus hungry prime, he's going to hit that body. That's the reason why Ray Mercer didn't win that fight. Mercer never hit the body. He stunned him all over the place and kept headhunting. He didn't hit the ribs at all to weaken Lewis for the later rounds. And people say, well, but Lewis had that jab. I mean, whoever out jabbed Lennox Lewis. Let's see, Ray Mercer, Vitaly Klitschko, Hasim Rotman, and this is all after Emmanuel Stewart was his trainer. So it could be done. So Tyson had better hand speed, better combinations, and was a more ferocious fighter at his peak. Lennox Lewis's peak came later in life. It came in his late 30s, and that's another thing people overlook. Tyson was done. Oh, age is just an excuse. Well, okay, someone else put it like this. Vladimir Klitschko had more left at 36 to 38 than Muhammad Ali did at 36 to 38. Different fighters peak at different times due to various circumstances that nobody can scientifically break down. So we can't go with what Lennox Lewis, because if you're taking peak Lennox Lewis, it might be a 35-year-old Lennox Lewis.
Right.
Because he peaked later. You're going to talk about 21 to 23 just before Tyson lost to Douglas. So you're probably talking about the Michael Spinks fight, the home Spinks fight. So I think he was 21, 22. That's the Mike Tyson you're looking at. You're about, like you said, about 88. Versus the 99 Lennox Lewis. Well, he was close to his mid-30s by then. But that was peak Lennox Lewis. He was at a good weight. He wasn't 220 he was closer to 240, borderlining towards 250, but he had solid legs. He had wide back. He wasn't just skin and bones like he was when he lost to McCall. And so you're pushing these two dynamics together of two highly different styles. one guy did well against no matter who you put him in against. Because let's face it, even though Terrell Biggs is no Lennox Lewis, he was tall, lanky, he had good hand speed, he had a good jab. None of that faced Tyson. Lennox Lewis, on the other hand, as he's approaching his peak in his late 30s, is getting pushed around by Oliver McCall in the first fight. He's getting knocked out by McCall. He's getting pushed around by Frank Bruno. He's getting pushed around by Ray Mercer. And Ray Mercer's after Manuel Stewart became his trainer. He gets knocked out by Hasim Rockman. And even if you could say maybe he didn't train, well, if you're going to use that excuse for Tyson against Douglas, you know what I mean? Tit for tat.
Well,
two guys that didn't deserve to be heavyweight champion were champion because two guys didn't take their job seriously.
Right. I mean, look, listen. You made a compelling point with the knockouts. I mean, the Lewis being stunned. But as Quentin Lassiter sort of reiterating what I said last night was, those guys had different dimensions than Tyson. Now, granted, Tyson was a better fighter than most of those guys you mentioned, despite his proportions. There are different proportions. But that's where we get into the whole style matchup, because Lennox Lewis would have forced Tyson to come to him, to leap forward. And at that point, Lewis had, along with Emmanuel Stewart, had perfected that, something that Vladimir Klitschko would later incorporate and master himself, that extending the arms and just octopus you into a clinch. It was disgusting. I hated it. But if the referee allows him to get away with it, it's very difficult. I find it very difficult for Tyson to land consistently enough clean punches. And also, you can hurt Lennox Lewis. Okay, they hurt him. Can you put the finishing touches on the dude? You know,
Tyson could. Tyson could, and the reason why I say he could is because Tyson he's the embodiment of a heavyweight finisher. Always was. When he had you in trouble, you were done. He never had Holyfield in trouble. He never had Lennox Lewis in trouble. He never had He knocked Buster Douglas down, but Buster Douglas really wasn't in trouble. He punched the ground because he was cognitive of the fact that he messed up. He may have been stunned and went down, but he wasn't dazed on rubber legs with glassy eyes. He was cognitive of what was going on. But anybody else that was ever in any slight amount of trouble, he finished you off. Now, so that's why I think that he could, if he hurt Lennox. The question is, with Lennox's clinching tactics, which I've said in other debates, especially in the BDA chat room, with Tyson being weakness of the clinching and not knowing how to fight out of the clinch, that's the caveat that you brought up. That is definitely a situation where Tyson could lose. Because if Lennox, pause the jab to invite Tyson in and then quickly clinches him and leans on him, that type of Lennox Lewis might be able to beat him. But not many people were successful against 1988 Tyson doing that. 86 Tyson, Bonehugger Smith, and Tony Tucker, and a few others were able to worry that storm and lean on him. And they were big like Lennox. They were over 6'3" and over 230 pounds. So they were big guys and leaned on him and kind of labored him. So from that aspect, you are correct. There is that style could be a bad style matchup that could lead to a victory for Lennox Lewis in the late rounds. The question is, in doing so, in the process of leaning forward too much, of getting too comfortable, of trying to get that, can he get caught with a shot he doesn't see? Then when he gets caught by lesser punchers and lesser finishers than Tyson, does he survive?
Well,
so
that's
I'm
my
not
thing,
picking a winner. I'm saying that these are the questions of what we would have to find answers to if they ever fought in their peaks.
Now, Lennox Lewis had firepower too. Good stiff jab and a heck of an uppercut. Now, to sort of counter my own point, it did take Lennox Lewis a significant amount of rounds to take out a coked out Mike Tyson. So Mike Tyson, whether he was coked out or in his prime, he had that neck of his, bulldog neck, that made it nearly impossible. You had to batter him just to get him out of there. And also the fact that an old Holyfield in the rematch, some feel, a minority, feel that he actually did enough to get the win over Lewis. I'd have to rewatch the fight. I don't recall. I do recall it being more
competitive. The company included.
Oh boy. Well, listen. Well, there you go. So, but I'd have to rewatch the fight. But it certainly was more competitive than the first one, which is considered one of the worst robberies of all time. So there is that to be said about Lennox Lewis. Again, I'm not confident in Lewis beating Tyson all 5 fights if they fight 5 times, 10 times. But I do think that with the modern referees nowadays, they just let guys get away with clinching and all that. I think it would be a tall order for Tyson. But let me get your thoughts on this. the aforementioned Evander Holyfield. Now, by the time Holyfield beat Tyson, and again, most people forget that was actually a mismatch going in, and in Tyson's favor. Most people didn't want the fight to occur. They thought Tyson was going to physically kill him, murder him.
Yeah.
And instead, Holyfield just, seasoned at that point, well-conditioned, dirty, and he was able to drive Mike Tyson nuts. Do you think that the Holyfield that went to war with Bo, the Holyfield that was, just getting out of cruiserweight and all that, him against the 88 Mike Tyson, how do you see that one going?
The reason why I pick Holyfield over Tyson, no matter what, is the fact, and why he has a better chance than Lennox Lewis, durability and chin. Not much so. I mean, chin usually think is durability. Holyfield was durable to the body and the head. Dwight Muhammad Cowie, I'm sorry for slurring that, was a very strong guy at cruiserweight, and he hit Holyfield with all sorts of shots. Holyfield took it all. Now, he's no Mike Tyson, but as Holyfield got bigger and stronger, regardless of whether it was due to vitamins or just good genetics, he was also a very durable guy. What Bo beat him up with in that first fight would have stopped almost any other heavyweight in history, period. If everyone endured the same thing Evander Holyfield did, only the most durable heavyweights would have survived that. Not Riddick Bowe. Riddick Bowe, we're talking about. Michael Moore would not have survived that. Lennox Lewis would not have survived that. Now, I'm not saying he would have. I'm sorry if he took the abuse that Holyfield did. I'm not saying that Bowe would have beaten Holyfield. I'm saying if he took the abuse that Holyfield did, Lennox Lewis wouldn't have made it to the final bell, because I don't think his chin would have held up. So now I'm not, but Lennox Lewis is a different figure, and scientifically breaking it down, I get all that. I'm talking about absorbing that punishment. He was absorbing light punishment against Rotman. Yes, he wasn't in the best of shape, but light punishment against Rotman, because Rotman was landing that jab throughout the fight. He was throwing the right hands to the body every time they clinched, and he'd land ones just on the temple every time they got the clinch. He'd lean back and hit him there. And so these little shots were starting to add up. Lennox is thinking, I can take the shot. And then he set him up and knocked him out with one good right hand. Okay. And Rotman was a strong guy, but he wasn't a power puncher. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't a knockout one punch guy. So you put Lennox Lewis with that, he's able to get knocked out by that. Again, take that much punishment. Well, he barely beat Ray Mercer. He got beat up pretty well against Ray Mercer. Now you're talking about a bigger, stronger, faster, younger, more proficient, faster combination guy, and Riddick Bowe doing similar punishment to Lennox Lewis. Okay, now what have to do with Evander Holyfield? Holyfield could take all that. He could take all that and answer back. He wasn't focused enough. It's like the Ray Leonard thing. He fought Ray Leonard against Duran. He fought Duran's fight in the first fight. It's what everybody says. Holyfield fought Bowe's fight the first fight. He stayed on the inside. He traded too much. He wanted to knock him out so bad that he'd take 3 punches to try and land his own. And Holyfield's not that kind of a puncher. He can get you off accumulated shots if he sets his shots up right, especially with the one you don't see. That's not how he fought that first fight. So
yeah, the book on
Holyfield able to take that. Go ahead.
Yeah, the book on a potential Holyfield Tyson fight pre-97 is that Holyfield would have been too much mentally for Mike Tyson, and for all the reasons you said, Holyfield, well conditioned, just as strong, perhaps a little less than Tyson, but strong physically, wherewithal, indomitable will. Yeah, I agree with you on that. By the way, we got Gonzalo here. Gonzalo, there's a lot of background noise in there. Let's do a sound check. How you doing?
I'm back on the bamboo stick. We got a power struggle between Lobito and Teddy for alpha status. But I just turned off the fan, so it's not blaring in the background any longer. How's my internet?
You sound good. You sound crisp. It's just there was some background noise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gonzalo, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, how you doing, Chief? Mr. BDA?
Fellas, hold on real quick. The phone lines are open in case anybody wants to weigh in on this or on the fight this weekend between Sepeda and Hughes. Gonzalo, we're just talking about, because Chief and I were talking about Tyson versus Lewis. And I just want to say one thing, moving on to a different subject here, but we can stick to this a little bit more. In 2021, I started thinking about how a lot of people complained that today's boxers lack skill. The days of yesterday were better than today, And I said, well, let's put that to the test. I decided to go back just 10 years. Forget 2035, just 10 years from 2021 to 2011, and to judge how the guys from 2021 would do against 2011. And one of the things that I came up with was, I was thinking about David Haye versus Alexander Usyk, Andrew Ward versus Canelo, Sergio Martinez versus Jermell Charlo. And then I realized, well, what about the heavyweights? Now, at that time, we're talking middle of 2021, so Usyk hadn't yet beaten Joshua. But you got to remember, back in 2021, a lot of people favored Fury over Joshua. So I said, well, wait a minute. If I go back to 2011, it's Fury versus Klitschko, which really did happen 4 years later. So, I'm not all that convinced that we should include it in the list. But then I started thinking of Vladimir Klitschko. This dude beat, Gonzalo, we were talking about how Tyson, his reign was short, but within that short reign, he pretty much beat everybody that was in the scene. And same thing with Klitschko.
What was that, BD? 5 years? 5 years, half a decade?
It was 86 to 90, so it was like 3.5 years, more or less. And
and if you include the prison time, well, that doesn't count. But anyhow,
that doesn't
it's
count.
Popular.
But Klitschko, Vladimir Klitschko, I stopped watching him.
Dr. Steelhammer?
Dr. Steelhammer. I stopped watching him after 2007 because he was just boring. But in hindsight, the HBO was trying to prop up Calvin Brock, who was an undefeated heavyweight at the time. Klitschko just knocked him out. Then there were these Eastern Europeans like Ibragimov and Chagaev. They couldn't do anything with Klitschko. Klitschko just mauled them, molested them, and jabbed them to death to a decision wins. Eddie Chambers was a guy who had quick hands. Maybe he could have done something. Klitschko knocked him out in the last round and pretty much won every round. Who else am I missing here? Povetkin later on, gold medalist, scored some good wins. Klitschko again molested him and beat him easily. David Haye, a cruiserweight who wasn't a small heavyweight, by the way, 6 feet 3.5 inches tall, like Usyk. And on top of that, he had hand speed and power. A lot of people thought that he was just going to connect on Klitschko and knock him out. Klitschko outboxed him. So, Gonzalo, it's fair to say that Klitschko, even though he was boring, pretty much like Tyson, pretty much beat everybody that was on the scene. And even when he lost to Fury, it was an uneventful fight. It's not like he got schooled or anything. So, Gonzalo, what do you think? How do you think Vladimir Klitschko would have done against, say, Lennox Lewis? I'm talking prime Vladimir Klitschko.
They never fought. They never did fight, right? They could have fought. Okay, obviously, if you're asking the question, well, no, they didn't fight. Prime Lennox Lewis. I'm talking about Dr. Steelhammer, like the younger brother who reinvented himself behind Stewart school of thought. In other words, the straight punch, the right hand behind the jab, the 1-2, and he did it so well to like where after discovering that as a big man, I don't necessarily can say that he had a bad chin or not, but yeah, he did get knocked out 2 times. And Lehman Brewster, after discovering that, like, dude, like on the inside, I cannot trade with these smaller heavyweights because they think that the bigger heavyweights, they're just going to dominate. But in regards to Lennox Lewis, yeah, he was also a big heavyweight. So we got a big man versus another big man. I just think that Lennox Lewis has more variation to his arsenal. But then when it comes to the heavyweights, the 1-2 can work for you. The 1-2 could be very solid, and that's all you probably need. Because like they say, as heavyweight, one punch can change everything. You don't want to do a little too many. You want to keep it simple. You want to keep it basic, but you want to be methodical about it. And if you can get in your 1-2 and be effective, get the knockout. Because as we know that punch. Would the fight go distance, I don't know. I just think that Lennox Lewis would probably knock him out within like 9 rounds because he's got a little bit more variation. Just a special recipe that you need in heavyweights. A 1-2 could work very well for you, but he's just got that little mixture. He's a little bit more versatile.
And also because I think Lennox Lewis, I think the way it probably would have gone was both men just staring at each other, boxing from the outside. And I think at some point Lennox Lewis would have taken it to another level and actually initiated the attack. And Vladimir Klitschko wasn't that great a counterpuncher to the point where he would run Lennox Lewis into something. And Lennox Lewis had a little bit more toughness too, mentally. So I think he probably would have taken it to Klitschko and won that fight that way. Klitschko, I will give him credit, Vladimir Klitschko, because for a long time he was fighting shorter guys. Povetkin, Shagayev, Ibragimov, and he would just rest on top of them, mold them. Same thing to Frank Bay. Shout out to Frank Bay who mentioned Sam Peter. Yeah, he beat Samuel Peter in a war the first time. Then by the second time they fought, Klitschko was just on another level. And again, jab, clinch, 1-2, clinch. Same thing with Lemon Brewster in the rematch. So he fought a lot of guys that were 4 or 5 inches shorter than him, and he would just molest them, and he beat him that way. But I do give him credit because when he finally fought a guy who was as tall as he was in Joshua, he still managed to, he was outboxing him for a lot of rounds. So that's when the fight that finally made me see, oh, hey, this guy was big, but why do you keep laughing, Gonzalo? What the fuck?
No, I'm just the dogs. I'm just looking at the dogs. Never mind.
But anyway, yeah, it sounded like you were mocking me.
Go ahead, Mr. Brito.
But Vladimir Klitschko, yeah, it's. I think he did have those skills. I finally realized it when he when he lost to Joshua. And that's another thing that I wanted to talk about. A little segue here, real quick, because Chief, we were talking about how the knock on Mike Tyson is that he never overcame adversity. When he took on James Buster Douglas and he hit a wall, he couldn't overcome it. It reminds me a little bit of Roy Jones. I have a bone to pick with Nigel Collins, a guy that we tried to have on the show there, Gonzalo. He said he wasn't doing boxing podcasts anymore. But when Roy Jones lost to Tarver by knockout in the rematch, I remember reading Nigel Collins' column, editorial, and he said that, I finally respect Roy Jones because just like Pernell Whitaker, when he lost to Trinidad, he lost, but he showed us that he had heart. He showed us that he wasn't going to flop, even in the rare occasion in which he found himself losing. And Roy Jones, when he got knocked out against Tarver, he tried to get up, so he showed me heart. That's what Nigel Collins said. And I remember reading that in 2004.
That was the editor of the Ring magazine, right, BD, back in the day. Then he went to the other magazine.
Yes,
right.
Thank you. And I remember reading that in 2004 and thinking, well, wait a minute, Nigel. He showed heart in the first Tarver fight, which he won, when he was dead tired and somehow summoned the will and a second wind to get through round 11 and 12, and actually won round 12 and got the decision. So I don't, that's just one thing about Roy Jones. When people go, he was all talent, and once that talent left, he became mortal and beatable. Yeah, he might have become beatable, but he showed heart in that he won the first Tarver fight.
Yeah,
I
can accept that a guy like I don't know how many years he gave us in comparison to Mike Tyson. Look, to the people that don't know, maybe they're younger, they haven't been watching boxing. Think about Teofimo Lopez. Think of a tiger, dude, that can pounce on you and get you at any moment. Like the reflex, and if the skills weren't there, but when he did have it, like as a prime Roy Jones, yeah, he was a beast, and I could accept whatever Roy Jones gave us. That's good enough. Even if later he fell the fuck off, like 1 year past, like where the reflexes and the athleticism eroded, okay, that's fine. But when he was on point, because I remember my cousin used to play for San Diego Padres, he told me, "Hey man, that dude is a bad fighter," and I'm younger than him, and I was like, I always pay attention to some other people say, depending on who's saying it. If somebody else that I like, I respect and somewhat admire, or like, I'm thinking of like when I was younger. But yeah, Roy Jones in 1990, actually, dead on 1990, he was a bad man. He just was. I can accept that.
Well, Roy
was
Jones
he tough later, or did he fucking fold? I mean, he's still in love with boxing. He's still involved in boxing. Obviously, he loves the sport.
Yeah, that's the strangest thing about Roy Jones, that it seemed like he was the top fighter that hated boxing the most. See, I got the impression back in the late 90s, early 2000s that he couldn't wait to get out of boxing. The way he treated the fights and the way he treated the fans and the pundits. And then look at him now. He still wants to fight. And the fact that he got knocked out like about 3 times in a row brutally, he was the last guy you would expect to go through that. But also Roy Jones, the 3 big wins. Well, actually 2 big wins and most people... No, okay, 3. Let's go with 3.
Eddie,
The Bernard Hopkins fight. All right, Gonzalo, I can hear you in the background there.
Yeah,
3 big
these
wins.
motherfucking dogs are fighting. They're fighting over alpha status. Sorry, leave me put
Can't
on.
you put one in a cage or something?
Well, they're inside my room. Let me put them outside. Sorry.
Yeah, man. If you know they're fighting with each other, why have them in the same room? Lobito's going to get caught in the crossfire. Excuse me, Gonzalo's going to get caught in the crossfire. You're going to hear him scream at one of these points.
Yeah, let me just put him outside. Or behave, motherfuckers. Behave.
Oh.
Lobito, Teddy over there.
I don't think
Never mind. Okay, we're good. We're good.
Okay.
We're good.
Chief, we were talking about one of because we were talking about the all-time greats and all that. Roy Jones sort of falls into Mike Tyson category because that's another dude that the public perception changed after he. I'm looking for the right words here, because him and Tyson sort of fell from grace at around the same time, 2005. And even though Roy Jones kept on fighting, I suppose to me you can end the book on Roy Jones after 2005, or maybe if you want to go to 2009, right? But Roy Jones was another dude, Chief, that Gonzalo and I were talking about it. How he might not have fought the best, especially after he beat James Stoney. He sort of fell into a bit of a lull, but Virgil Hill, Reggie Johnson, those are 2 solid guys. They got a lot of good work done, and Roy Jones made them look ordinary. What are your thoughts on that, Chief?
So Roy Jones is an enigma to me in certain ways for certain reasons. One, he openly came out around before he fought Eric Lucas on saying stuff like, when am I going to fight this guy? When you pay me. When are you going to fight this guy? When you pay me. Even though he was great, he wanted Oscar De La Hoya money. He doesn't have to admit he was jealous of Oscar, but he was jealous of Oscar. And even though he was a much more talented actor than Oscar could ever be, and he didn't have the same kind of talent level around him that Oscar did. Having said that, he didn't send offers that we know of to Chris Eubank or Nigel Benn when he got to super middleweight. He didn't send offers to Darius Michalczewski ever. He claims he did, but Michalczewski has countered that with his own interview, which I sent to you. So you read what Michalczewski's side was to that. So he said versus he said, we don't know which one you'd rather take, but he didn't fight Michael Nunn or Gianfranco Raccagiani. Instead, he fought Derek Harmon, who wasn't even ranked number 1. So he kind of set the blueprint that Floyd gets accused of before Floyd even turned pro. Now, again, the other problem was, what would he have done against a peak Virgil Hill, not one that had already been beaten by Darius Michalczewski and coming back down from cruiserweight? Logic is he would have beaten him anyway. But we have to acknowledge what we think based off of the kind of athlete Roy was. But he didn't fight him. He never fought a prime Hill. He never fought a peak or prime Ben or Eubank. He never fought Michalczewski. He never fought Nunn. I mentioned these already. I'm not going to beat those dead horses, but he went and fought Otis Grant instead.
Everybody else with Michalczewski, they were a little bit. That was the generation before, no, just a little bit. He probably would have beat those guys because in those divisions, people are just getting knocked out left and right. They just start Michalczewski. That's a interesting subject. We don't want to beat a dead horse. We know that Michalczewski got 25 title defenses. He's like the number 1 when it comes to but you got to think that guy represented that title on that side of the world. If they would have met prime for prime, we cannot say that Roy Jones was scared of that guy. I'm just saying, he was a good fighter. But
so let's put historically.
But all the other fighters that you mentioned, they were a little eroded. That was the generation. Those are 1980s fighters, late 1980s fighters. Michael second to numbers.
Well, okay. Well, wait. Let's historically put something out there. So maybe he would have beaten him, but Nunn was his number 1 contender, and he didn't fight him. He fought Derek Harmon instead. Rakajani was his number one contender. He didn't fight him. That's why he got that. That's why Rakajani got that $40 million lawsuit against the WBC, is because Roy didn't fight him. And so these were his number one contenders. Would he have been? And Ben and Eubank were both champions when he moved up to 168. Now, your point of the fact that he probably would have beaten him anyway because they're eroded, I won't argue that. You have a very valid point there. But the point is, they were champions there, and he didn't send them contracts.
Well, this is Chief. I see a common theme with the fighters from the late 80s slash like 1990, 91. Julio Cesar Chavez, Mike Tyson. Oh, they all fought fucking cab drivers, but they were staying busy. Maybe at the time to make a fight, it was kind of difficult. But fuck it, like let's put the sport on blast and talk about like we're not. They weren't even thinking about that back in the day. They just wanted to fight, so they were fighting guys. They were just staying busy. Maybe it's one of those things that we didn't get the when Oscar De La Hoya and Tito Trinidad came along and fucking Vargas and all those guys. Yeah, those were the fucking fights. Because I think maybe they got their head out of their asses and like, okay, we're gonna make this happen to get money, not for the betterment of the sport, because we're gonna fucking become rich. The Mexican market, call it what you will. Even like black fighters, man, it was a popular thing. They were knocking. The heavyweight division was very popular, but there was a lot of heavyweights back in the day. You can mix and match, pick and choose. The fights were there, and they was on. But when it comes to the divisions that you're mentioning, I'm not necessarily sure that it was like a duck. I'm just saying, for some reason or another, from fighters from across the pond, it wasn't happening. But it's just one of those. It's not a mistake, but it's just an incidence of like a cause of like time. It just is what it is.
I'm not
like
following.
If revisionist history, we can go back and say, oh well, and put it on today's terms. Oh, it didn't happen because now we may be thinking that the business of boxing is not necessarily. Back in the day, it didn't necessarily represent that. It's
okay,
just
well, let's
like,
put things back in perspective. Let's put this things back in perspective. Let's put things back in perspective. Roy was his own manager. And technically his own promoter. So there's that aspect of the whole thing. Let's add in the fact that
he was his own brand. He was his own brand too. So obviously he was popular.
So I mean, to say that like this, and plus Chris Eubank and Nigel Benn fought each other twice. Steve Collins fought both of them twice. So these guys were fighting each other. Roy just didn't want to cross the pond because Roy's excuse was, I quote unquote don't want to get robbed. Now he would say he could beat Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield in the same night, but then he wouldn't rematch Bernard Hopkins because now it was a money issue, but he would say that fight's too risky for that kind of money. Okay, so you can beat two heavyweights in one night when you're not their size, but a guy that's smaller than you is too risky because you're not getting paid right. These were words out of his mouth. So I'm only holding him accountable for things that he said.
Look, everybody knows Roy ducked a lot of fighters. That's a fucking fact. I'm not saying that you're not saying something that isn't true. That's just a fucking fact.
But to wind back around on the athletic talent, though, I don't think I've ever seen a fighter as athletic. Shane Mosley at lightweight had glimpses of what Roy could do at many weight classes. So when you talk about a fighter's entire career, when they have longevity, like a Holyfield, like a Roy Jones, like an Oscar De La Hoya, what specifically are you trying to pinpoint? Because Roy's athleticism was unmatched. That's absolutely right. And like you said, Reggie Johnson was a solid fighter. And even though Virgil Hill wasn't at the best of his game,
Virgil Hill was a badass. He was a great champion. A lot of title defenses.
Virgil Hill did go up. Maybe he was past those days, though, when Roy fought him. However, he did go up to cruiserweight and win the WBA title at least one of two more times. So it's not like he fought a shot Virgil Hill, but he didn't fight a prime Virgil Hill. And the reason why I say this, because Virgil Hill was a very, like you said, a lot of title defenses. He was a competent fighter of his own. So what would that have been, peak versus peak? We don't know. What we do know is that Roy, when they fought, was clearly a step above him. I still think Roy would have beaten him regardless. But
can I just say that that Roy Jones, like you said, I don't think I've ever seen somebody with the eclectic mix of speed and power that he had. But on top of that, people don't give him enough credit. And I'm not saying you guys, but I'm saying overall, they don't give him credit for how smart he was, because we've seen guys who have very good athleticism and physical gifts. I mean, Amir Khan was very, very quick at 135, 140. Lightning quick, getting it out. Zab Judah in his prime. Mayweather at 130 and 135 was lightning quick. But Roy Jones, I'm talking about Amir Khan and Zab Judah, for example. Those guys never accomplished half of what Jones did, because Jones had a brain. He knew how to set guys up. He could punch with either hand. Like, there was a brain there. It's just his style was so unorthodox that, it ended up hurting him down the line. But to say that it was all talent, like some people claim, to me is nonsensical. But going back to the Michalowski fight, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. How would Michalowski would have done? Because I invite people, if they have a chance to do so right now, maybe if they're on their phone, they won't be able to, but watch some of Michalowski's fights. And I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Is it Michalowski or Michalowski?
I think you just nailed it, BD. I think you just got it on point for like the first time.
These Polish names, these Polish names, the X, sometimes the KI is Ksai or whatever. Anyway, the point is, watch his fight against Montel Griffin and Virgil Hunter. Now, of course, Virgil Hill. He wasn't as impressive against Hill as Roy Jones was, but the way he would walk guys down, parry the shots, nonstop pressure, suffocating pressure. I mean, this dude was a problem. Now, his parry game was very good. Very, very good. Mm-hmm. But would Roy Jones's incredible hand speed circumvented that?
So, but my best guess on this is on two different sides of that coin. So I'm going to try and play on both sides on how these guys could win. Roy's obviously going to be able to time some of what Michalowski does and hits him with an amazing shot he doesn't see. Now, whether that knocks him down or out remains to be seen, because he's a very durable guy, but he could bust him up and get stoppage off of swollen face and stuff like that. However, Michalowski wasn't afraid to punch with you. And when Lou DeVell punched with Roy, he knocked him down. And if you remember, it was only a split second. It was kind of like what I talked about Burbick against Tyson with that body shot. It was one shot that kind of made Tyson wince and take half a step back. Murky Sosa did the same thing against Roy against the ropes with a shot that Roy didn't. Now, Roy battled through it, and it didn't really deter him, and he won the fight by second round knockout. But the point is, it can be done, and Michalowski is a step above those guys. So when it comes down to it, everyone's going to say, most people are probably going to say, especially in the chat, Roy still blows him out, and you may have a point. But the intangibles that did happen to Roy, even at his peak against lesser fighters, Michalowski was better than them at. And so he could probably have given him a tougher fight than most people give him credit for. Who do I pick? I don't know. I just know that there's a reason why Roy
not for nothing. He's the number one guy with the most title defenses in that division.
Yeah, that's true.
He's the number one.
And remember, he had 3 of the 4 belts. Yeah. He had 3 of the 4 belts at first when he beat Virgil Hill. So it wasn't like he just had the WBO and only defended that. When he beat Virgil Hill had beaten the number one guy at the time in most magazines in Henry Maskey in Germany by decision.
Actually, not only in that division, I think that division and his title defenses are the most in any division. He's like the number one title defenses, and that's just. But that raises an eyebrow too. Okay, well you beat a lot of dudes. Okay, what does that mean?
Joe Louis.
No, I think Joe Louis has more years, but I don't think he has as much title defenses. He's reigned for a longer period.
Let me just say this.
25 title defenses in one weight class.
Fellas.
Well, I think Michalowski had 25 or 27. I'm just saying, correction. Joe Louis reigned for 13 years.
Let me say this, please.
Anyway,
let me say this.
It doesn't matter. It's just.
Let me say this. Let me say this. If you think that the European disrespect, or the disrespect towards European, I should say, is bad now, you should have been there during the 90s when there was no YouTube, there were no torrents. If you wanted to watch a fight from overseas, you had to know somebody that had a satellite dish that could capture Sky Sports or a German channel, whatever, and watch these guys. And at the time, a lot of people had never seen Michalowski fight, and so they thought, Roy Jones just smokes him. He's a European pastry. In fact, I was looking through my tapes here the other day because I needed to digitize something for a video, and I find a clip of from 2000 or 2001. It's Max Kellerman on ESPN Friday Night Fights, the studio segment, and he's like, "Well, we know why Roy Jones doesn't want to go to Germany because he's going to get robbed. Same way Montel Griffin was robbed against Michalowski." I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, was it a bit of a
got knocked out?
Yeah, was it a bit of a quick stoppage? Maybe. I'd have to rewatch it, but fucking Michalowski was walking him down. And yeah, he ate some shots, but in hindsight, Michalowski did something that was very economical. His style: walk you down, parry shots, nonstop pressure. He wasn't moving his head excessively. He wasn't stepping in and out. That's why he more often than not he came out with wins, because his style was very economical. So this whole disrespect to Michalowski during the 90s is something that unfortunately we still see today in boxing, where people think Europeans are inferior to the Americans. Meanwhile, the Americans, you see them having that ass style. A lot of them, not all of them, but some of them employ the ass style, which is running around the ring, clinching, one punch at a time, shaking their asses, and getting the ref's help or the judge's help. And then, so that's why when Roy Jones said, well, I'm afraid of getting robbed in Germany. I mean, what? Some of the worst decisions ever have taken place in the United States. So miss me with that whole thing about only in Germany. And by the way, fellas,
Next time the Eastern European fighter gets a decision in America, will be the first.
Exactly. The phone lines are open, and we got 2 people calling in here. I don't want to keep them waiting too long, so let's get to this, and then we'll come back here to some of this boxing talk, old school boxing talk that we got going. Don't forget to hit the like, fellas. Hit the like. Real helps out. Let's go to 713. 713, you're on the air. 713, what's on your mind?
Yeah, the thing about Roy Jones is that he never had the stellar opposite fighters. Like I see with Floyd.
All right, hold on. Caller. Hold on a second. You're sounding very low here. Hold on. Let me see if I can patch you through again. Hold on. Give me 2 seconds. Okay, you might have to call back. Let's see.
Welcome to Blog Talk Radio.
All right. Go ahead, caller. Let's see if I can hear you now. Shit. All right, call back.
Start your show now.
Since it appears you're calling back into a live show.
Sorry about that. There was something that got screwed over. 713, make sure to call it back, all right? 713, call back. Sorry about that. Let's go to another phone call here. Let's go to 410. 410, you're on the air. 410, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I've said for a while. Now, first I'm going to say Roy Jones was a splendidly gifted fighter. But when he was the pound-for-pound #1 guy at light heavyweight, he was overrated, flat out overrated. The fighters of prominence that were around him were Chris Eubank, the Dark Destroyer, Nigel Benn, Steve Collins, Michael Nunn, and Darius Mikulichevsky are the four or five that come to mind. Roy Jones didn't fight any one of them. Instead, he fought Tony Thornton, the punching post man. Guy wasn't even a full-time fighter. He fought another guy who was a policeman who wasn't a full-time fighter. He fought an Australian guy whose name escapes me right now, who was a garbage man. Now, Roy Jones, at that time, this was before YouTube and people talking boxing like that, but boxing fans, a lot of boxing fans were, if he would have been fighting the guys he was fighting then, now he probably would be getting crazy criticism, because you remember he was the #1 pound-for-pound guy, and he didn't have no problem telling you that all the time, yet he's fighting guys that weren't even close. And you might even throw Gerald McClellan on that list also. And Roy Jones didn't fight any of those guys. Those were the top guys. It wasn't the guys that he was fighting, Clinton Woods, this one and that one. These guys, and it was to the point, and I tell people, why would Roy Jones make a rap album with a clapback track on it, with one of the lines being they say I haven't fought nobody. I just make them look like nobody. Yeah, you haven't fought nobody, except for Bernard Hopkins early on, a young Bernard Hopkins, which was a dreadful fight if you try to watch it. The Tony fight, that was a good fight. He gets full credit for that because Tony was a really good fighter, and he was probably a little bit more disciplined at that time. And Jones, he put on a much better performance in that fight. But the Hopkins fight is so dreadful, you can't even watch it. So the only thing I can say in Roy Jones's defense in regards to all that is Darius Mikulicki didn't fight none of those guys either. They both had their own market. Darius over in Germany, I believe, and Roy here in the United States. And so, if you look at Darius's resume, he fought a lot of walkovers too. He was a really good fighter, and the anticipation for them two to fight was huge back then among hardcore boxing fans. We all wanted to see it, but Darius was not much better than Roy, in my opinion, or no better really, in picking walkover fights.
Yeah, I mean that was Gonzalo, you're breaking up, man. Gonzalo, you're breaking up, man. You're breaking up, man. But yeah, Jerry, man, you're breaking up, Gonzalo. I said, yeah, but Jerry, I agree with you, man. The Roy Jones, that 99 to 2002 period, I don't know what he was thinking. It seemed like he had a foot out the door, and he just wanted out of boxing. And then that's the ironic part, that he stayed in boxing way too long, even though he hated the boxing. So it's one of those boxing always throws you a curveball at the end of the day. Anything else you want to say, Jerry?
Yeah, but I'm talking primarily when he was at the top. He was the number one pound-for-pound guy. Now, yeah, I agree. He stayed too long, really tarnished his legacy, if you ask me, because he seemed like he was getting knocked out by everybody after he came back down. But I'm talking about when he was at light heavyweight and he was at the top. And while Darius was guilty of the same thing and never fought Eubank or Nigel Benn or none of those guys either, I always felt like it was incumbent on Roy to make the fight with Darius because Roy had all the belts, and he was the one considered to be the pound-for-pound guy. Well, he had all the belts except for the WBO belt that Darius Mikulicki had, and that's why he was never undisputed there because he didn't want to get that belt. Now, I don't believe that Roy should have had to go to Germany, but for whatever reason, I know HBO used to talk about making that fight, and that would have been a hell of a matchup because Darius was head and shoulders above the rest. Now, I probably would have picked Roy Jones to beat him due to his athleticism, but that's the thing, you don't know. We've seen what happened with Clinton Woods and a few others where when Roy would be pressured, he could be gotten to, and Darius was a real strong fighter in that capacity. So, we'll never know now. But anyway, that's my call.
Well, that's a good point. That certainly, I remember the sentiment that was a sentiment back in the day that Roy Jones should have done more. But anyway, listen, Jerry, man, we got to move on. But thank you for your call, and call back next time. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Well.
Spot on. He was spot on a lot of that. He was a little off on some of the weight classes and time frames, but
Jerry's an old head, man. He's an old head, but he's sounding loud and clear. He's sounding like more sharp. Is this like NPR's little brother?
Ah, come on.
Okay, but my point is Chris Eubank, Steve Collins, and Nigel Benn. So his time frames were a little off on some of that stuff. But the other things that he said, so I mean, I'm not going to nitpick everything he said because I liked that call a lot. Let's put it this way: when I have that conversation with somebody, I would have had an easier conversation with him than anybody else because he wasn't just a Roy head. He knew the time frames and the fighters that were around there better than anybody else I've talked to outside of this panel. So
the way I interpreted what he said. The way I interpreted what he said about the Brits is that I assumed he was talking about a period of time, meaning 97 to 2002, that those were the guys that he could have fought in that period. Not necessarily that during 2002 he would have fought Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank Jr.
But they would have had to move up. They would have had to move up to fight Mikulicki. Roy was in their weight class. There's the one factor, but he's still. I mean, look again. If he had 10 nails on the board, he nailed 9 of them. So,
well, I mean, the other thing is
that was a great call.
the other thing is it's the Hopkins rematch. The issue was money, and it's interesting because back then it was a rarity to hear so many people battling it out over money, whereas now it's the norm, especially with these American fighters.
Right.
It's Gonzalo, you gotta. I'm gonna have to mute you, man, because there's a lot of background noise there. I can hear the show in the background. You get your speakers on. Please mute them, man. But nowadays it's a norm. The money. These American fighters, they're the ones that create the most drama in negotiations. I want more money. I want the size of the ring. I want to walk in first. I want to decide which color trunks you wear. And it's like a bunch of women. But back then, it seemed to me, Chief, you correct me if I'm wrong, that it was Roy Jones the one who was making a big muck-up about the money. Or was it Hopkins with the whole 60-40 thing? Or 50-50,
okay,
I
so
think he was.
Bernard had lost to Roy, and then needed 2 fights against Segundo Mikado to get the IBF belt. But from that time on, he had broken Monzon's record, unified the middleweight title to be the undisputed champion, and beaten a pound for pound great and all-time great in Felix Trinidad. So he'd elevated himself up to a point where he thought he deserved 50-50. I don't have a take on this, but that's what he thought. Roy said 60-40, you get your butt kicked. Now, what one of them broke down on ESPN, and I don't remember what it was. I think it was Bernard that did it. Supposedly, Roy was going to be getting $15 million guaranteed, and Bernard was going to be getting $5 million guaranteed. And when you do the math, that's not 60-40. And that's why Hopkins walked away. So I think it was Hopkins the one that said that. And my memory's getting older. I'm not making anything up, but I might be inaccurate on some of it. That's the best that I can remember, and I do not have any footage of it. I watched it on when Bernard was in the studio on Friday Night Fights. He was in place of Max Kellerman in the studio of Brian Kinney, and he talked about it. So that's the best to my recollection. What I remember, he did say it was over money. He did say they didn't like what they were each being offered. But if I remember correctly, he and I could be wrong. I thought he released the numbers of, and Roy never disputed this. So if it really was the 15-5, that's not 60-40. So Roy was saying 60-40, but Bernard wasn't being offered 60-40, and so he said no.
Right, and
that's the best that I remember.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's one of those he said, she said type of stuff. But Jerry did bring up a good point about Jones's. I had forgotten that little foray Jones had with hip hop when he made that track. You All Must Have Forgot, which in a way is an admission that the best years were behind him. You know, you all must have forgot, because you haven't done anything lately. And it's interesting because neither Roy Jones nor Hopkins were box office attractions. People forget that. Yeah, they were powerful. You know, it's like being the best at boxing is not synonymous with being the biggest box office attraction. And neither
Roy Jones wasn't. He wasn't. Why not? Why wasn't he?
Because because again, one of the big factors of becoming a star. One of the big factors of becoming a star is who you're fighting. If you're fighting a best, you have the best chances of attracting a public. Roy Jones wasn't doing that between 1999 and 2002 when he fought David Telesco, Derek Harmon, Clinton Woods, not in that order, but just about. So nobody was getting excited over that. And keep in mind,
about box office. That's right around the time when he came out in the movie Matrix. No, the Matrix in part 1 or part 2, I can't recall. He was one of the vampires.
No, he wasn't a vampire.
Yeah,
he wasn't a vampire. He was playing one of the people that got freed from the Matrix and used to go back. He had a very small role. He actually had a bigger role in the video game, if I recall correctly. I think there was an Xbox game. He actually had a bit part in that. But the point is that he was not a star.
But wasn't he a vampire? Wasn't that guy a vampire?
No, Gonzalo. I don't even.
I don't remember vampires being in the Matrix. I could be wrong. I didn't watch all of them.
But anyway, the point is that Roy Jones, for Roy Jones to be demanding 60-40 against Hopkins, I think it must have been on the basis of I beat you. That's why I want more money, because he certainly wasn't a bigger star than Hopkins. I think they were about the same in terms of star power.
Well, yeah, neither one of them could sell pay-per-view at the time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, I mean, well, all right, so Roy did do a pay-per-view with James Toney, and he did one with Vinny Pazienza. Those are the only two I remember prior to him fighting John Ruiz, and then he did one with Gonzalez, I think was his name, who ended up beating Michalczewski. But Roy lost lost later that year.
Mike.
Mikachev lost to Gonzalez.
Gonzalo, what do you have in the background?
Roy lost to Tarver later that.
Nothing. Everything is silent, BDA. Everything is silent here. There's nothing.
All right, because when I start talking, I hear myself.
Nothing. Everything's dead silent.
When I start talking, I hear myself in the background.
Yes, probably the internet.
All right.
Okay. Let me see.
Just mute yourself if we're talking. Just
maybe it's one of those things.
Please mute if we're talking, because then we hear ourselves in the background. But
okay.
You know what reminds me of this whole situation? Tank Davis. Tank Davis is nowhere near being one of the top 5 pound-for-pound fighters in the world, but he's certainly one of the most talked about on Twitter and in these Twitter wars and YouTube wars, and he hasn't fought anybody either.
Okay, so when we say hadn't fought anybody for either Roy or Tank, or even Bernard for that matter, you got to look at Bernard's resume. So I'm going to jump ship over to Bernard for a second. When I have a talk with people in a debate between Triple G and Bernard Hopkins. Now, you can't remove Felix Trinidad and Oscar De La Hoya from his career because he faced them. But with those guys being aside of what the icing on the cake for Bernard, and you look at everybody else that they fought, who's really got this resume of, wow, that was the best competition? That put him in the Hall of Fame right there. Okay, Felix Trinidad and Oscar De La Hoya, 2 smaller guys, but he beat him soundly, just like Bernard Hopkins. I mean, just like Carlos Monzon did, and just like Marvin Hagler did. Made their name off of great smaller guys while dominating their own weight class. Triple G didn't have great smaller guys with the exception of Canelo, and people got varying opinions on that. Point is, does anyone think that Triple G needs 2 fights over Segundo Mikado in order to win a title for the first time? And I usually get crickets back in response to that. Because it took Bernard 2 times to fight a limited fighter who lost every fight after he lost to Bernard Hopkins for the rest of his career. Didn't win a single fight that I know of after he fight. But who actually thinks that Segundo Mikado is going to fight Triple G to a draw? And I never get anyone that thinks that that's going to happen. But that's what Bernard was at the beginning of his career. That's what he was. Lost to Bernard. He fights with Mercado to be great.
Sorry.
Oh my God, Gonzalo! And now Gonzalo, your audio is all screwed up, man. I can barely hear you. And Chief, I don't think Chief was done talking too. By the way,
I pretty much made my point.
It's a delay. It's a delay. Sorry, because I got the fucking
the bamboo. Yeah, the bamboo stick. I got you.
Sorry.
I got you. That's all right. That's all right. But Chief.
So yeah, I was good. I'm ready for his rebuttal. I was good on that. Unless you have one, BDA.
Well, let's see if Gonzalo, what were you gonna say? Gonzalo. Yeah, we're having some major issues with Gonzalo because Gonzalo's in the Philippines. For those of you that might be unaware, and he's on some wild internet connection. That's why there's a big delay here, apparently. But I'll say this. I can't hear you, man. Sorry, man. You're breaking up badly. It's really bad. Okay, I'll say this then. In regards to the Mercado thing.
So let me go reload the data. I'm gonna go reload the data.
Yeah, please. That would work. Okay. Let me just say this, Chief. I agree with you about the Mercado. I think he fought 1 time after the Hopkins. Might not have been at all, but yeah, he was.
He fought a lot. He just lost them all.
Right. But in that original fight, the first one, it took place in Ecuador. The altitude over there is insane. And to be fair, for Hopkins to get a draw abroad in a place where he claims was under some sort of military coup, I think that's pretty impressive, man. He got dropped twice abroad in the guy's hometown and still managed to walk away with a draw.
Okay, let's look at the flip side. A 38-year-old or 39-year-old Triple G goes all the way over to Japan to beat Murata without it being a close decision or a draw. So a guy that's from from Kazakhstan, if I remember correctly, comes to America, makes his home, goes to England to fight Kell Brook, goes over to Japan to fight Murata. Nothing's close. He has 2 close fights with a guy that we have to consider to be a great, maybe not an all-time great, and I'm sure, where you put Canelo, but of today and of Canelo's accomplishments, gotta say, I don't like Canelo, but you know, or division champion, unified, and blah blah blah, all this other stuff. So that's his only controversial losses before the third fight, which was plain. So to put things in perspective, Hopkins was younger than Triple G was towards the end of his career, but they both started kind of late due to prison for Hopkins and a long amateur career for Triple G. But when it came time for like having to go abroad, okay, well, that's all Triple G did was abroad, and that didn't faze him. And Bernard, given it was a high altitude, and I don't think Japan's as high as altitude as Ecuador, so that is a significant factor. Climate conditions can be a factor, so don't get me wrong. But Mercado was not a world beater, and Bernard got knocked down twice. And you say still have a draw. Well, some people thought he was lucky for that draw. Most people thought he lost that fight. And then he brings it back to the States, and he beats Mercado, and he beats him handily. And he became an all-time great fighter. So I'm not trying to detract, excuse me, is the word I'm looking for, from Bernard Hopkins. I'm putting things in perspective. When you have two great middleweights and you compare their careers. So Hopkins had his two fights. There were two different fighters, De La Hoya and Trinidad. Triple G had his two fights, both with Canelo, and he didn't come out on top of those. So there's where you cement the two legends, because when you go anywhere else between the two of them and you compare their competition, it's really not one much better than the other. And when they first got in the title scene, given Triple G didn't fight a Roy Jones for his first title fight like Bernard Hopkins did. But Bernard got his second title shot against Mercado, he was lucky to get a draw, whereas Mercado's level of champion of caliber fighter never threw Triple G off.
Well, I mean, let's put you mentioned it yourself. Hopkins did end up beating the crap out of Mercado in the rematch, so there's that.
Yes,
I mean, there's that, and also Hopkins, he did have to struggle. Not only did he struggle against Mercado, he struggled against Robert Allen the first fight, and a lot of people feel a lot of people
shouldn't count as a title fight because it was no contest.
Which you know what they said in Ring Magazine said that they counted that as an official defense because technically he walked out over the champion. He walked into but that's why I understand, because technically no contest means the fight never happened, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what I think it was Mills Lane that was the referee that night said. So Ring Magazine, I respect what they were and are, and sometimes when writers do vote on the Hall of Fame, but they don't dictate the rules. And the rules state if you go into a fight and it's declared no contest, the fight didn't happen. Therefore, it can't count as a title defense. Therefore,
that's weird.
Bernard has 19 and Triple G has 20, except some of those are the regular belt. But, okay, to me, Carlos Monzon still has the record. They're done.
Well, not for nothing, but Hopkins did end up doing something Triple G never did, which is to go up to light heavyweight and two-time light heavyweight champion, two-time legit light heavyweight champion.
Yes.
So that's a little
I
plus.
compare usually. I stopped their comparison at the middleweight career because Triple G did not move up, and I don't hold that against Triple G, but I don't over-reward Bernard. It sounds like I'm doing a double negative for punishing Bernard. What I'm trying to say is when I compare them, I stop it at their middleweight career because Bernard went on to do great things after middleweight,
right,
and at higher weight,
right.
And since Triple G didn't, and Marvin Hagler didn't, and Carlos Monzon didn't, I don't factor that in compared to the rest of them because we're comparing him at middleweight. If we're comparing as where we rank them based off of what he did after middleweight, that's a different story.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And may I also say I prefer watching Gennady Golovkin fight because Hopkins, he had that mentality, convict mentality of win by all means necessary. And so there were a lot of blows, a lot of clinching. Like I said, a lot of people feel that in that Robert Allen fight, headbutts, thank you. A lot of people feel also in that first Robert Allen fight, when he wasn't going his way, he decided to leap out of the ring and take his chances with a no contest. And to his credit, if you gave him a second shot, most of the time, not always, but if you gave him a second shot, a crack at you, he was going to beat you. He was going to figure you out. Couldn't do it against Jermaine Taylor, though, which again, it's with a 40-year-old Golovkin, the one that beat Murata, would he lose to Jermaine Taylor? Again, we don't know. I don't know. But seeing how Taylor got his ass knocked out by Arthur Abraham, Carl Froch, Kelly Pavlik. I can see a
Kelly
39-year-old. Yeah, I can see Golovkin doing it, even a 39-year-old version.
Radio check. This is Blue Port Golf Radio check. How's my mic coming in? Because I just reloaded my data. I'm going to go back on mute. I'm just checking.
You sound much better now, Gonzalo.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
But, BDA, those were 3 devastating knockouts in a row, man. That dude, he lost his brain after that.
He did.
That was like some sick shit, man. Like, fuck, dude.
Gonzalo's
Talk about a guy that used to be, remember the Ring magazine? He used to be on the back page with the surfer uniform. We're talking about Jermaine Taylor. He was like the poster boy. Remember, BDA? On the Ring magazine?
And Gonzalo's not kidding around. He did. Well, first of all, he didn't get knocked out 3 times in a row. I mean, he got knocked out by Pavlik. But okay, let's not get into specifics. He did get knocked out 3 times, and he did go nuts after that. He keeps getting trouble over there in Little Rock, Arkansas, legal trouble. I think the last time he got in trouble.
Well, yeah, BDA. But what I'm talking, remember, like, because I know you used to read the Ring magazine as well. He was a poster boy for the Ring magazine.
I remember,
on the back page of the last. Remember, he used to wear the surfer uniform.
He had an Everlast sponsorship, and he would be featured on a Ring magazine. Oh boy, you're cutting up again there, Gonzalo. You're cutting off.
Well, BDA, remember he used to wear like a wetsuit, Everlast.
Yeah, I remember. But you know what though?
Yeah.
When I was talking about the class of, I wanted to do like I said a couple of hours ago, I wanted to do a segment one time, and I never got around to it, which was called Class of 2021 versus Class of 2011. Who would beat, were the guys from 10 years ago better than the guys we have now? And here's an interesting question. And I want people to really think about this before they jump to a conclusion. Alexander Usyk, whether at 199 or 190 or 205 or whatever weight, against David Haye. Now, again, before people jump in and immediately say Usyk, let's recall that David Haye had incredibly quick hands and power. That alone was enough to create the impression that he could beat Vladimir Klitschko. He iced Enzo Maccarinelli. It was scary. He beat Jean-Marc Mormac, and then at heavyweight, he stopped John Ruiz, who was a tough, rugged guy. He stopped Monty Barrett. He wobbled Valuev, who was a giant. I mean, what do you guys think? If Usyk and David Haye would have fought, and I'm talking 2011 David Haye versus 2018 Alexander Usyk.
The reason why I go with Usyk, he's a cerebral fighter who can outthink the other guy. Kind of like I had a conversation earlier today with a guy about the Flash versus Quicksilver. Now I'm talking comic books. How am I going to bring this back in? Please bear with me.
All right.
The Flash obviously has his superpowers are faster than Quicksilver, so theoretically he should win. But he thinks like a normal human being, and Quicksilver thinks at 175 miles an hour. So by being able to think your thought process ahead of the other person, theoretically, you should be able to anticipate and react before the other guy actually does something. That's Usyk. Now, the person that's got the power, the quickness, maybe not speed with combinations, but quickness is going to be David Haye. But he thinks at normal speed. So is he going to be able to use that athleticism to counter... to counter Usyk, or is Usyk going to be 6 moves ahead in chess the whole time? If Usyk's 6 moves
sorry, I don't know if I got a little bit of a delay, but I'm just going to say, when it comes to trading punches, I totally agree with you. Timing beats speed, but timing and speed will beat timing. When it comes ahead, if you can catch 2-3 punches, there comes a point where you got to throw your punch. So if you're anticipating that dude 6 moves, you're gonna throw your move in between his 6, anywhere between his volley. You're gonna catch that dude as well. So it's kind of like timing, but timing with a purpose. Timing with a purpose will be speed. Timing with the purpose, with intentions.
I hear what you're saying, and that's the factor that Haye would have, is that he has the timing with a purpose because he had all that power. But would Usyk smart enough to make that power play and play against Hay? That's the thing. The higher IQ is Usyk, and sometimes you play that random chess player that just goes all out and blitzes you with something you're not ready for. But most of the time, the chess player lets you make all your stupid moves and be overly aggressive, and then they get you in checkmate. So I'm leaning towards the chess player and Usyk, knowing the fact that he could get knocked down in that fight, but I don't think he'd get knocked out. I think he has a good enough chin. I think he's smart enough, and he would figure out a way to use Hayes' aggression against him.
Well, can I say that?
I mean, this is the weird thing, man. I'm sorry, BD. Usyk is built different, man. He got the dog. But when it comes to the body, I don't know.
Good point, but so I mean, you have a very valid point, but Hay was mostly a headhunter. If he was known for working the body a lot, I would take that heavily into consideration and might lean your way. But he was mostly a headhunter.
Well, I'll say this, man. You're absolutely right. Obviously, Usyk is the smarter fighter, and the more consistent because he, in almost every fight, somebody please point me out to a fight where he doesn't end the fight strongly. He always, he can lose the early rounds, but can you keep him off of you until the final bell? Even Mary's Brady's sort of slowed down in the later rounds, which allowed Usyk to overtake him, but that was a very tough fight for him. Now, the thing is, if Michael Hunter could get to Usyk, I've noticed that when Usyk fought guys with good timing and quick hands like Brady's and Hunter and Tony Bellew to a certain extent, he would revert to that high guard of his. And once you have a higher guard and you're standing in front of David Haye, he could get those hooks behind the guard. And you mentioned whether he was a body puncher. I remember when he fought Mormick, he went to the body something awful. Now, of course, Mormick, he's a come forward guy, whereas Usyk sets traps. So obviously it's going to be harder to catch him to the body. But I just remember that Michael Hunter fight against Usyk and how much trouble he gave him. Now, granted, Hunter is a little bit more sneaky than Haye. But man, Haye could quick punches. He was throwing grenades in there. The way he stopped Chisora. He stopped Chisora, man. He's a cruiserweight stopping a guy as big as Chisora. So yeah, man, Usyk would have to mind his PCQs, is what I'm saying.
Well, yeah.
BDA, didn't he go to the biggest fighter in boxing history? The guy that was like 8 foot tall.
Yeah,
he said he was ugly. He was the ugliest man he ever saw.
Valuev.
Yeah, Valuev. Excuse me. Yeah, Valuev. Thank you.
Valuev. Jesus Christ, dude.
To be fair,
he wobbled him too, and about 100-pound weight advantage. Well, I don't know if it's an advantage, but 100 pounds more than David Haye. So, all right, those things considered, I see why people say that Haye has a solid shot. I'm not saying that has no chance, but brains usually beats bronze when they set a trap. Lex Luthor was smarter than Superman and is fictitious, but he set him up with traps. You let him use strength against him. You're talking about that kind of mentality. You're talking about a smarter guy versus a stronger guy. I lean to Usyk, but I still think Haye's going to have his moment. I think Usyk survives and then uses it.
I gotta tell you, Chief, you're losing me with the fucking.
I mean, when it comes to setting the trap,
just real quick. You're
when it
losing
comes
me
to
with
setting the trap at the world level.
Gonzalo, just real quick. Yeah, you're losing me with the superhero analogies, man. That's when I go, you know what?
Sorry,
it sounds like you know what you're talking about.
Very long discussion about that today. I'm sorry, I won't do it again.
I'm kidding around, but yeah,
look. When it comes to setting the trap within, like, remember, obviously, Manny Pacquiao versus Juan Manuel Marquez, a shrewd counterpuncher, aggressive. For fights. When it comes to setting the trap between like the best of the best, and especially he got a game plan and he's trying to set you up. Good luck setting that trap for those that you're trying to set them up. That's all I'm saying. That takes a lot of skills, nobody.
Absolutely.
Because he's already trying to walk you into something.
I mean, just the fact that so many people are giving Joshua props for beating Ngannou, and they're realizing how good he is and how dangerous he is at his size. The fact that Usyk went 24 again, go back to August 2021, a good month before Usyk and Joshua actually took place, how many people were here telling us Joshua was going to walk Usyk down, Usyk was going to have no chance. As soon as he got hit, he was going to go down. Now things have changed because he went in there 24 rounds with him and proved he was better overall than Joshua. But again, let's not forget that not that long ago, a lot of people thought Usyk was outmatched against Joshua. So it is possible now that he's being overrated, perhaps. But before we get into that, let's go. Gonzalo, I gotta go. Gonzalo. Yeah, I know. I gotta go to a phone call here. The guy that I hung up on accidentally is calling back. Let's go to 713. 713, you're on the air. 713, what's on your mind?
Yeah, to me, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, man. Go ahead.
Hello? Oh, okay. Yeah, to me, Roy Jones never really had the stellar opponent. Someone already mentioned it, but I'll put Usyk over David Haye because whether people like it or not, Usyk has a gold medal. And then he's been doing it for a while. And then I remember Haye fought someone, he messed up his toe, and I think he lost that fight, if I remember right. I think he just barely got signed on to Golden Boy, where he was like a partner or whatever. But to me, Usyk over David Haye, because he's so skillful. And then he's about to take on Fury. Whether he wins or loses, that's still like some cruiserweight, damn near super heavyweight, but it's a fictitious weight class. But that's my argument. That gold medal is. There's a reason why these boxers they want that gold medal because it's like supreme. Anyway, that's my thoughts. Thanks. Bye. Enjoy your show.
All right, thank you, man. Thank you. Appreciate it. Call back next time, man. Take it easy out there. Yeah, that's a good point. Usyk does have that gold medal, whereas Haye had a very short amateur career. I think he turned pro at 18. Let me just double check. But he never competed in any of the major tournaments, I don't think. I'm here on Wikipedia and it says, hold on a second, it says that he fought in something called the Copenhagen Cup in 2000, Trofeo Italia in Naples, 2002, and he fought at the World Amateur Championships, but do not confuse that with the World Championships. The it says the IBS Men's World Boxing Championships and the IBS are biennial amateur competitions organized by the International Boxing. Because what's the difference between that and the World Championships? I think it's just a different name. Well, it says he medaled silver. So anybody that can do an amateur tournament must be some sort of good. But anyway, the point is, as professionals, I think I agree with you guys. I think it would be tough, and I think this dude would be the most dangerous guy that Usyk would have fought in terms of the first 6 rounds, because he could hit as hard as Gassiev, but then he had super quick hands. But at the same time, he could be figured out. And that's Usyk's game right there. He just figures, he's fought all types of styles and he figures them out. So I would go with Usyk, but man, those first 6 rounds.
Let's also remember, Usyk's a southpaw. So the stuff that, and I'm not saying that David Haye never fought a southpaw and he couldn't impose his will against a southpaw. Mm-hmm. But a lot of these openings he does that are so explosive against everybody else are against right-handed fighters. Not all of them, but most of them. And Usyk sees right-handed fighters every day, all the time. Point. And even when he fights southpaws, he wins those fights too. So that's a factor. We go back to foot battles. I've mentioned this before. And Usyk is not small compared to Haye. He's small compared to these heavyweights, but he's not small compared to Haye. He is the size of Muhammad Ali. Height, reach, weight, that is Usyk. I'm not saying that Haye that doesn't measure up to the same way because I don't know everything about Haye. But I know 6'3", 81, 80, whatever fingertip to fingertip Usyk's reach is the exact same as Muhammad Ali's. Now, he may have broader shoulders and shorter arms, but his reach is the same. His height is the same. He has the dimensions of Muhammad Ali. He's a left-handed fighter. He's fast. He's smart. And so you add these factors in, especially foot battles and stuff like that. Haye's either going to leave himself open and square himself up more now to try and land his shots, or maybe he does have this athletic ability that and able to impose it against Usyk and throw him off. But if anyone's going to get thrown off, from my opinion, it's going to be Haye. His timing is going to be thrown off. Everything's going to be thrown off. And Usyk can possibly be in the toughest fight of his career, or he can make Haye look stupid.
That's a great point. You make a great point. He never fought, as far as I remember. Maybe somebody can correct me. I don't think he ever fought a world-class southpaw, either at cruiserweight or at heavyweight. And Usyk is nothing but tricky as a southpaw. And you're right, man. And this is a fight that could have happened, but by the time it could have happened, Hay was past it. He'd taken a 4-year hiatus, came back against nondescript opposition, and then Tony Bellew beat him twice. So there would have been no point in that fight happening. But if we're talking 2011 David Hay versus 2018 Alexander Usyk, oh boy, that would have been a doozy.
Yeah,
that would have been a doozy.
It would have been a hard one to pick. I'll put it that way. It may not have been a doozy because, like I said, Usyk might have made him look stupid. But going into the fight with the I said maybe. I didn't say it would have happened. But the intangibles of
you said a doozy. Yeah, that's a cool phrase, a doozy. From the 1929 Duesenberg. One of the greatest cars ever built. That's a doozy.
I didn't know that. I didn't know the etymology of that.
That's a doozy. The Duesenberg.
There you go.
That's where that phrase comes. It could have been a doozy. Anyhow.
You learn something new every day with Gonzalo. Now, real quick, before we go. Was that, Chief?
I said, thank you, Gonzalo. I didn't know that either.
Yeah, I didn't know that. One last fight that I thought was very interesting again in this 2011-2021 thing. Sergio Martinez versus Jermell Charlo at 154. Recall that Sergio Martinez really did his business at 160, but that was because there wasn't much for him to do at 154. He just went at 160 to chase, because I think they offered him a Kelly Pavlik shot when Kelly Pavlik was supposed to fight Paul Williams, so he went in there and beat Pavlik. So he beat Pavlik, he beat Paul Williams, then he beat a very good fighter in Sergey. I don't even know how you pronounce his name, but Dzinzruk was a Ukrainian fighter, undefeated southpaw. Martinez took up boxing late, but again, like David Hay, incredibly quick hands, power. He had heart, great conditioning. And so I'm thinking, guys, right off the bat, I'm thinking if he were to fight Jermell Charlo, Jermell Charlo has very good power at 154. A lot of his fights ended by knockout, even though he was losing. So if Cotto could hurt Martinez, I can see Charlo hurting him. But at the same time, quick, wily southpaw, I think he would have been able to tee off on Charlo. Now, do you guys think Martinez would have made it the distance? Or do you think he gets caught?
Oh, no. First of all, let's look at the Cotto hurt a Sergio Martinez that was his best days had 2 knee braces on. There's nowhere near his prime.
Right.
And I'm not taking away from Cotto. Cotto did what he was supposed to do with a guy that didn't belong in the ring. He finished him off. So praise to Cotto. You got to be middleweight champion. But I actually think Martinez was better at 154 than he was at 160. And he was actually avoided from a lot of guys for a long time. He was number 1 for the WBC for quite some time and wasn't getting title shots. And so when he finally made his shot, I forget the guy's name. Alex Bonilla, I think was his name.
Yeah,
he punished Bonilla in that fight. He punished Bonilla and had fun doing it and just teed off on him, like had his hands down, hit him with everything, almost never missed. Now, Bonilla was not a hard guy to hit, but it was the way he just effortlessly threw every shot he wanted to, and it didn't look like he ever got hit back. Bonilla was a solid contender, and he made it look easy. And in the meantime, Jermell Charlo is struggling against Gonzalo, who's the guy that thought that the WBO champ that everyone thought beat Mel the first time.
Austin Trout?
Mel the first time. What do you call it? Another Argentinian guy. What's his name? The short guy. Was El Boxy Castaño.
Yeah. Castaño. So
another fellow Argentinian.
Yes, and you called me out on that, by the way. I like to give you credit for the fact that I thought Charlo was I said the cream's gonna rise to the top. You called me out, and you were right in that fight.
No, I didn't call you out, Chief, like that. I was just talking boxing.
You did.
No, you actually told me. You actually said to me, and I remember this distinctly. Said, "Have you ever seen Castano fight?" And I tried to blow it off, and then I had to eat my words after that because you were completely right about that.
Yeah, but it wasn't a direct call like that. It was just we were just talking boxing, bro.
True. Okay, I'm not insulted, and I give you praise for for that pick over mine, and you saw something I didn't in that first fight. Anyway, back to the point of Mel and Martinez, though. We're talking about a right-handed versus a left-handed fighter again, and we're talking about squaring up and things like that. We're talking about someone who's hot and cold in Jermell versus someone who was not hot and cold at 154 in Martinez. And Martinez was hungry at 154 because he'd been kept down so long, whereas Mel had pretty much been handed almost everything on a silver platter. They didn't make him fight the tougher guys and Laura and J-Rock and guys like that. He ended up fighting the Rosarios and the guys that didn't seem to be as tough. I'm not saying he was protected. It's just the way his career went out. Whereas Martinez had to fight. He got robbed against Kermit Cintron at least once. Beats Bonilla. They called one fight a draw. I think there was another decision. The Paul Williams fight, even though it was at middleweight, was called a draw when most people thought he won. So he had a chip on his shoulder and he fought that way. Mel acts like he has a chip on his shoulder, but it doesn't always fight that way. And so when Martinez is going to have a moment like that, especially if you're dropping him as the challenger for Undisputed, because we never really set the terms of what this fight would be on. If you drop Martinez as a chance to prove himself for Undisputed King against Jermell Charlo, I pick Martinez because he's going to have a chip on his shoulder and he wants to prove how good he is.
And can I say that when Martinez fought adversity, first of all, Rafael Garza makes a good point. He says, when Sergio Martinez knocked out Paul Williams on HBO, and I know Stewart sounded sad. Yeah, you got this. I got the sense that he was rooting for Paul Williams, and that when Paul Williams made that decision in the rematch to really get close to Martinez and try to suffocate him, Stewart wouldn't shut up about how, I just think as Paul Williams has more, essentially he was just saying he had more dog. He didn't use that modern nomenclature, but that's what he essentially was trying to get at, that Martinez was going to wilt. And I remember thinking, well, wait a minute. In the first one, Paul Williams put on pressure as well. Maybe not chest to chest, but he was putting pressure. And Martinez kept up with him, which surprised me in terms of stamina. So it just seemed to me that Stewart had a little bit of American bias there. So he thought, oh, this guy from Europe, he's not going to be able to withstand the American pressure. And then Paul Williams, when he fought Kelly Pavlik, he started fading a little bit in the middle rounds. In fact, Kelly Pavlik dropped him in those middle rounds. And then he got his second wind. And when he caught Kelly Pavlik, he strung together like a nonstop 20-punch combination. It was amazing. So this dude had heart. His technique sucked, of course, because he picked it up late. He picked up boxing late, so he skipped a lot of steps.
Well, knee braces or not, he was a cyclist. The dude had good legs. Even at an older age, he just had good legs. Because he used to what do you call it? The guys that ride the bicycles on the Tour de France. That was a Sergio Martinez. It was a cyclist.
Yeah.
Knee braces or not. Even at older age.
That's why he didn't run as much. He used to do more cycling and some sort of a rowing or something. By the way, people are saying, well, what do you mean Europe? He's from Argentina. But I think he was fighting out of Spain back in those days.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, BDA. He fought out of Spain, even though he was from Argentina.
That's where he made his bones, essentially. So, but you guys are right, Argentina, whatever. But it just seemed to me like Stewart was making it out to be like, well, this guy's American made. You know, these guys are tougher. These boys are tougher. And I don't. Martinez was plenty tough. Now, let's not forget, Austin Trout gave Jermell Charlo a very tough fight.
And you got to BDA because you got to consider
hold on,
Argentinians are tough fighters.
Gonzalo, let me just finish. Martinez had quick hands. That's okay.
Yeah,
that's okay. Martinez had the quick hands and power on top of that, and combination punching. Whereas Trout was a one punch at a time type fighter.
This is true. Go ahead, Gonzalo. Go ahead.
Because I got a little bit of delay. Most Argentinian fighters, they're tough. They're tough as nails. Argentinian fighters, they're just, they got a chin too. Argentinian fighters got no quit in them.
They fight a lot too. Like it's not unusual to see them with like 80 to 100 fights. Now you'd see a lot of repeat victims on their records, but they fight a lot, and so they're hardened fighters. I don't know skill levels. I'm not going to analyze all that and stereotypes of their fighting style, but they are definitely very tough men, tough fighters. durable fighters most of the time. Rarely do I see Argentina fighters that get knocked out as easy as Colombian fighters. So
remember Latigo Koji, or what's it called? Those were the 90s that freaking Randall fought.
That's
those
Koji.
were tough, dude. Ever since.
Yep.
Koji, all those dudes were tough. Cristanto España, all them Argentinians. They're just tosudos, what you call in Spanish. They're tough as fuck.
Don't forget that Julio Cesar Vasquez bit Winky right.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And
knocked him down 5 times. And those were not slips.
A lot of some of them were slips, but you're right.
He slipped over his fist 5 times.
Well, I mean, I do remember one was where like they had these weird knockdowns where it seemed like he slipped, but again, I'd have to rewatch the fight. It's been a long time. You got to give credit too when it comes to Argentinian boxing. There was a guy by the name of Amilcar Brusa. He was the godfather of boxing there. I mean, if anybody came out of Argentina and made a name for themselves, he was usually in that corner working in some capacity with this dude, Carlos Baldomir, Carlos Monzon.
Yeah, I remember. He got inducted in the Hall of Fame when same year as Duran Whitaker and Ricardo Lopez. I met him up there. He's all I can say is I met him. He didn't speak a lot of English, and I don't know enough Spanish, but he was a very tall guy. But my mentor Enrique was saying, when I was trying to meet him, he's like, you need to go up and meet this guy because this guy, he is like a boxing legend. And you're right, he was a legendary trainer down there.
Yeah, man. I mean, if this dude was anybody that was somebody, and actually, I'm looking. Hold on, I got my list here of Amilcar Bruce's fighters.
BDA. Was Monzon Argentinian or Uruguayan? I forgot because that's
he was Argentinian. He was an RG. He was an RG.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Galindo, was he Mexican? Or?
Galindo. You talking about?
Well, he was like a middleweight or Galindez. You had a Galindo and a Galindez. He was like Indian looking motherfucker, not like the Argentinians we think about that are like mixed blood, German, Italian, whatnot. Galindez.
Victor Galindez.
More like a Peruvian motherfucker, but yeah, I think he was Argentinian as well. Was he not?
Let me check.
All those are tough, man.
He was Argentinian.
You're right. Victor Galindez, who looks like a Australian Aboriginal. I just looked it up. Yeah, he was Argentinian.
Jesus Christ, dude! That guy's he was a monster.
But yeah, man. I mean, yeah, and that's the thing, though. It's Amilcar was a trainer that could take a guy that was limited and get the best out of him. That's the mark of a good trainer. A guy like Brendan Ingle too. The type of people that he worked with, most of them had that weird Nassim Hamed style, Harold Graham type style too, Johnny Nelson. But just look at those 3 guys, man. They got a lot done, and he worked with, Young Kell Brook, I think, as well. And he's the one that made Nassim Hamed, by the way. It wasn't Emmanuel Stewart. Some people might forget that. So the trainers today, we still have some of them. People talk about, the old school tactics are getting lost. Fuck, man. I mean, hey, Robert Garcia, look at, he's involved. Apparently you go to his gym at any moment and you want to spar, there's always somebody there to spar. That dude is a factory of fighters. So when people say, but boxing trainers nowadays, and then that dude, Freddie Roach might be past it any day now. He's probably going to retire. But he's got that Filipino dude under his tutelage who seems like he's going to be able to carry the torch. So boxing never really dies, man. Yeah. Especially with the internet. You can always pick up old school tactics there.
Well, don't forget who we learned from.
Somebody's going to take over that gym. I think I know who you're talking about, that Filipino guy.
I don't know if he's Filipino.
I know exactly. I know exactly what you're talking about, BD.
Yeah,
because I've been there many a time.
And like Chief was saying, Roach got a lot of that from Eddie Futch. So it gets passed down. The knowledge gets passed down. We got a phone call here. 713 calling back. 713, you're on the air. 713, what's on your mind?
Yeah, about Carlos Martinez they're the same fighter, except they're the exact same fighters, but opposite. One's a righty, one's a lefty. But Martinez I believe he lost to Margarito at the welterweight. He got knocked out before all the plaster controversy. And then Carlos, he had a unanimous decision, and then he comes back twice and beats him, right? But they're like the same fighter for opposite. They're good fighters, but they won't be like the But Martinez, he had the Spaniard trainer, Pablo Sarmiento. I believe that's the one that made him a champion, and I think he had to go to jail or something, and then his brother took over. But Martinez was never the same. I was seeing when he was fighting towards the end on HBO, when the top supported him, he lost his ability, and he was aging too. So he went when he fought Cotto, he was done, and then he took a beating with Tom Jr. Anyway, that's my take on the fight.
All right, thank you for calling back, man. Take it easy out there. Yeah, I'm having a hard time hearing him. I think he was it sounded like he was at the garage or something, or at the gym. Maybe that's what that sound was, the clanking of metal there. Yeah, people
talk about my internet being bad.
Come on.
Homeboy's internet is like way worse. Well, never mind. I'm just joking. Tell it to the guy that called.
Yeah, shout out to him. Quentin Lazarus says that the guy who's picking up the Freddie Roach mantle, his name is Marvin Samudio. And I don't know if he's Filipino, but it does sound
Marvin Samudio, yeah.
It does sound like a Filipino name, though. So we might be onto something there.
Yeah.
Well, listen, fellas, that's about it.
He's a little guy. He's like about 5'1". He's a little guy. When I used to go there, you know who was there? Brian Vilorio. I don't know if he's left also. And there was other few coaches there, but I don't know how many years that Freddie Roach got left, but certainly he's getting older. But but he's training Jaime Munguia now. That's a PR. In my opinion, that's a PR move. I'm not saying that Freddie don't got it, but BDA, remember? Well, in the last few years, Freddie Roach was catching a lot of L's, but his legacy cemented, like as far as like legendary status. People are quick to forget, but in the last 5 years, Freddie Roach has caught a lot of L's in the corner.
Yeah, he sort of fell off. I mean, you got to remember, it was a Pacquiao thing that really allowed him to attract other guys like Amir Khan, Jorge Linares, and of course, those are off the top of the head, the guys I remember. But yeah, afterwards, he started. He's certainly not in the 2008, 2011 position that he was. That he used to be
and people kind of disparaged him because of his condition till he was reduced to the spit bucket guy with Ben Davis, and I forget a couple years back. He wasn't even the lead trainer. It's like, oh, fucking Freddie Roach, take a back seat. Like people are like dissing him.
Well,
because a lot of in this day and age, people say again, Bree.
To be fair, yeah, it's that disease is taking its toll on him. He wasn't a spring chicken back in the 2000s and late 2000s and even less so now. So, and by the way, we got a phone call here.
Yeah.
Before we go, we're almost done.
Let's go.
Yeah, let's go, man. Let's go. 410. You on the air? 410. What's on your mind?
Yeah, it's me again.
What's up, Jerry?
Martinez.
Hey, Jerry.
Yeah, he was an exciting fighter. What's up, guys? He was a very exciting fighter. One of the memories that sticks out most to me is that mollywop KO of Paul Williams, God rest his soul, in the rematch. I remember getting ready to watch that fight, and I was really looking forward to it because the first fight was a really good fight. And I thought Martinez won the first fight. Paul got the decision, if I remember correctly. I told my wife, I said, this is going to be a good fight. I said, who do you think's going to win? I said, well, it's hard to say, but if Paul Williams gets hit the way he did in the first fight, this fight could end early because Paul was getting mollywopped in the first fight. He took the shots, but I told her this fight could end early, and then bang, man, what a KO that was. But let me ask you this: I seem to remember, and I could be wrong about this, but it seems to me that what's his name, the Spaniard dude that we're talking about, he had the 160-pound belt, but he would often fight at 155. Is that not accurate?
I think he used to weigh in. He was barely weighing in as a middleweight, I think.
Yeah, because he would defend that title, and he would have guys fighting him at 155, from what I remember. And I know when Cotto got that belt from him, he did the same thing, and Canelo Alvarez got it from Cotto, and he did the same thing. All three of them, if I remember correctly, weren't they were mandating catchweights defending that WBC middleweight belt. Can anybody confirm that?
That's a good question, man. I'd have to double check. But I do remember, I think there was some sort of catchweight for the Cotto fight. Something weird was going on. I definitely remember they didn't allow him to wear his knee braces. So that could have been it, man. But
yeah, well, I'm talking specifically about the weight.
Yeah.
Martinez, I remember him making defenses of that belt and mandating that it was at 155 because he was a small middleweight, even though he packed a huge punch. But Cotto did the same thing. And I remember, I'm almost certain when he fought Canelo, that was at a 155-pound catchweight for that WBC belt. Canelo was still, and then Canelo, I know he had when he was fighting at 155. I'm almost certain he had that WBC middleweight belt, and people were screaming for him to fight Golovkin. And then one last thing. In my estimation, you still hear people say that Canelo, aged Golovkin out in the first fight. That's bullcrap, man. Gennady Golovkin was one fight removed from, I think, 19 straight stoppage victories and defenses of the middleweight title. Hold on, and he was ranked in everyone's top 5 pound for pound when Canelo fought him in his first and second fight at middleweight. People forget Canelo was still at junior middleweight, but when he moved up, he fought him in his first and second fight. And Golovkin, like I say, was one fight removed from like a 19 or 20 fight KO streak. So he didn't hold him out, not in my eyes.
Yeah, well, that remains to be seen.
Golovkin did get a late start.
I don't think you guys can hear me, right? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Recognize. I can hear you. Loud and, well, not necessarily so loud.
Well, hold on.
And before you get in, and I don't usually interject between the callers. BDA, let me just say something. Golovkin got a late start, but then if he would have fought Canelo would have got ruined. Well, you know when Mauricio Suleiman put fucking Munguia's not whole card, but in the sense that he wanted to fight Munguia, where we're talking about Rafael Espinosa and fucking El Pollo Aguilar. He would have got ruined. Canelo knew if Canelo would have fought fucking Golovkin in the first fight, he would have been damaged. We wouldn't have had the one of the greatest fights of all time, Canelo Part 2. I'm not necessarily talking about one, and I'm not trying to make this into a fairy tale story. I'm just saying a lot of things that Jerry's talking about. It makes a lot of sense.
All right. Well, there you go.
I just wanted to say about what Jerry was saying about Sergio Martinez. It's a little bit inaccurate. So when Sergio Martinez was fighting at middleweight, when he became middleweight champion, he didn't have no catchweight fights except the Cotto fight, and Cotto wanted. I think that was like at 158 or something like that, and obviously he lost that fight. That was like his last fight at middleweight, or as a champion. So he used to come in. He used to come in like 157, 158. Yeah. He would always make the weight, make the middleweight limit. Under the middleweight limit. Excuse me, of 160. And so he would come in but all his opponents could come in at whatever. If they make it at 160 on the dot, it didn't matter.
Yeah, hopefully that clears things up there, Jerry.
No, it did matter because when he fought Canelo, it was at 155. It wasn't at 160.
Jerry, I'm not talking about Canelo. Jerry, I'm not talking about Canelo. What I'm talking about was when Sergio Martinez became champion at middleweight. You said that he used to have catchweight fights, and I'm like, no, he did not. Not as a middleweight champion. He never did. The only one that he did
not against
Cotto. Yeah, it was against Miguel Cotto, and Miguel Cotto was the one that suggested that. And it was like to be fair, it was like 158, something like that.
See, I thought I'd remember that. Yeah, that was my impression of that. But hold on, real quick. All right, Jerry, hopefully that clears things up. Thank you for your call, and call back next time, man. Take it easy out there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember something about that. But go ahead, Chief. Go ahead.
Well, I'm looking at it right now, and Martinez weighed at 158 and looks like 3/4, and Cotto weighed at 155. Now, I don't remember the circumstances of the weight being set and this, that, or the other, but recognize is completely 100% accurate. He weighed in under the limit by like a pound or two here and there, like 157 and a half ish on almost all of his fights, because he wasn't really a middleweight. He was a solid junior middleweight. He went up moving in because there was no real fights for him at 154, and he did say he was having trouble making the weight, so he moved up, but he just, because he was so conditioned at that weight, he just didn't put on a full 160. He usually weighed in between 150, like I said, 157 to 159, rarely weighed a full 160. But there was no catch weight on any of his fights leading.
Right. That's what I meant to say. None of his opponents were obligated to be under the 160 limit. They could come in at 160. It's just that with him, he would always, I mean, Jerry was right. He would always come in 157, 158, 159, below the middleweight limit. But his opponents were not obligated to that.
Yeah, and also Sergio Martinez didn't have the juice to do that, to impose those type of tactics. By the way, fellas, real quick, got to go to another phone call here before we end this. Let's go to 915. 915, you're on the air. 915, what's on your mind?
What's up, fellas? Buenas noches. How you guys doing?
We're doing fantastic, man. Hope you're doing fantastic as well, man. What's up?
Yes, sir. Hey, un big shout out, un saludote a Fernando Beltrán, bro. Putting two of Tijuana's best in a fucking undisputed title in the same fucking weekend for Mexican celebration. We got Jaime Munguia, Canelo Alvarez. The first time in boxing history, two Mexicans share the ring for the 4 major titles. It's a big fight. I don't give a fuck what anyone says. And then 2 days later, we got Luis Panterita Neri facing the motherfucking Japanese monster. Like I said, bro, shout out to Fernando Beltrán and the Zamper fucking crew. You gotta tell David to go join them, bro. Because it ain't look like he's fucking trying to fight anybody in that side of town, bro.
I mean, he's gonna be fighting a light heavyweight, apparently, man. I mean, that's and they never tried to enforce a mandatory against Canelo. So that's just like we're talking now here about Jones, Michowelski, and all that. I suspect that in 20 years from now, we might be end up unless Canelo really presses for that Benavidez fight, because I don't think Benavidez wants it, man. That's the way he's looking at like right now. I suspect we might.
It's a great year for boxing and Mexican boxing in that sense, bro. Because I'm giving a big chance of both of these Tijuanenses the upset, bro. Luis Neri, I know a lot of people like to talk shit about Luis Neri because, the dude got stopped by Figueroa, weight bully Figueroa, if you want to say the least, at 122 pounds. Let's not forget, Neri was putting hands on that same Luis Figueroa. That whole fucking, pretty much the whole fight. There's a lot of bullshit that was behind Neri's fall that fight. This man was 25 pounds overweight, 3 weeks out. The last 3 weeks, this motherfucking dumbass had to, cut that weight really, really bad. That shit affected him in the fight. He gassed out. His fucking brain was telling his body to do something that his body wasn't reacting to, bro.
That's right.
He's out here training where I'm at, bro. It looks like he's extremely focused. Because he's been out here training since Sonny got his ass beat by Bam Rodriguez.
Okay.
So, man, the odds are great. I think he's a plus 600 the last 12 rounds.
Interesting.
Y'all really betting, man. Do your motherfucking homework.
Yeah, he it's interesting nowadays. These guys are getting to they fight Inoue. They get into the best shape possible because they know what's coming. So, hey, two big fights on the same day. I'm looking forward to that one, man. I'm getting up early for those two. For that Inoue Neri, no question about it. All right, well, caller, man, we got to move on here, but great call and call back next time, right, man?
All right, bro.
All right, take it easy, man. That's a good update there. Neri's training like a monster, and he should, because he is fighting a monster. All right, well, listen, fellas, we got to wrap it up here. It's almost, it's already 11 p.m. Got to go. But it was a good change of pace here for the show. Talking about, speculative fights, old school, not old school, but fights from 20 years ago, maybe more. I mean, there's only so much we can talk about. Canelo Benavides, PBC, Tank Davis, Fury Usyk. Enough. Need a respect from all of that. I want to give a shout out
enough
to...
is enough.
Enough is enough. That's what I say. Shout out to Recognize, Gonzalo, Chief, for dropping by. Good talking to you. Everybody that called in. Everybody that listened to us via the chat here, via YouTube. Shout out to Super Sardonic, to Matador Nerd, HJ92, Skull K25, Quentin Lassiter, King KO, Protectorate General. If I forget anybody, it's because we gotta go. But shout out to you, fellas. Thank you for joining us. And we'll catch you in the next one. Don't forget, Second Renaissance. Check out the Second Renaissance. I'm gonna